It's on, isn't it?
Okay, I just turned it back on. Okay, so it's 6:30. We should probably get started.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, August 28th, and it is oh, Roger says he can't
Access the
access.
packet or the Zoom link.
I don't know. We have other people in. I don't know what
I don't know.
problem he's experiencing.
Ask Marcia's advice, if she's on.
Did anybody have trouble getting in? I didn't.
Nope, no problem.
All right. Can somebody respond to Roger and let him know that it's a problem?
He just joined.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll get started. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Wednesday, August 28th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Select Board. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here at the table by Mary Layton, the vice chair, and Priscilla Vincent. And we're joined online by board members Marcia Calloway and Roger Arnold, and town manager Brennan Duffy. And we're calling the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And looking at the packet, thinking about it on the way in tonight, I realized that the August 14 minutes did not make the packet. So we should table number 14.
Pam,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, and I had sent an email before I was able to locate the Zoom link on the draft agenda. I could not download the packet nor get to the Town of Norwich website. So I don't know I don't think it was just me. So I don't, anyway, Marcia seems to have her hand up. Maybe she can.
Yeah, Marcia, you have something to share on that, Marcia?
I'm wondering if it's the browser issue that Heidi was talking about. Could you try a different browser?
I can. I wanted to share if I'm the only one, then I'm sorry to waste your time. But if it was more than one person, it may or may not be an access issue.
I haven't heard of anybody else having that problem.
So I'm trying to get to the website right now, and it's giving me Safari cannot open the page because they couldn't connect to the server. So there is something.
Well, let me see if I can get on the town website. I will give it a go here.
Firefox works.
So I mean, 2 out of 3 of your browsers do not. So just FYI.
Chrome is not working.
Oh.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt.
Do you have Firefox? Roger, do you have Firefox loaded?
Not since the early, but I can figure it out.
I'm on Safari and that didn't work.
So Safari and Chrome are not working, but Firefox does.
Okay.
Weird. Okay, anyway, Will, go ahead. Will Smith, did you have something you wanted to say? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I just tried getting on the Notch website and I couldn't do it on another computer. Somehow I got it on my iMac. But I went down to the living room, tried to get on there and it would not connect.
What browser are you using? that you got
Uh,
on?
Chrome, Google Chrome
You
on
got
both computers.
Did you get on with the browser?
Not in the living room. I'm on it now, obviously. With my iMac
But
and
what browser did you use to access the website?
I said Google Chrome.
Okay. Well, you got on the Zoom meeting, but did you get into the town website?
I can try it right now.
Yeah, that seems to be down unless you have Firefox. Okay, we need to, Lily,
Can I move to amend the agenda? I'm not sure if I can do that from the floor.
please come up if you have something that you want to offer on the agenda, because we're working on that now.
Could I please add to my agenda item, which I think is number 5, not just the CTCL grant, but also an update on the National Endowment for the Humanities grant, for which I applied last January.
Do you have
Super
a,
fast.
do you have a deadline?
No, it's just getting you up to date. It will take under a minute.
But it's not in the packet.
It is not in the packet. It's simply a verbal report. It's not requesting anything.
Oh, it's a report that you want to give? Okay, well, you could also do that under public
I
comment.
can do whatever you please.
Let's do that under public comments, if you don't mind. I think that works better. Okay, sorry. All right, Will, your hand is still up. Did you have something else you wanted to offer?
I don't. I got my screen scrambled at the moment. Let me straighten it out, and then I'll mute.
And put your hand down, please.
I'm working on it.
Okay, all right. So my amendment to the agenda is that number 14, we don't have the August 14 minutes, so I would like to table that. Are there any other items that need to be changed on the agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I move to approve the agenda and table item number 14.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
No, as to 2 and the characterization of 6.
Okay, and Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, 4 yes, 1 no. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the chair's report. 2 things on the chair's report. I met with the town manager's office to work on the agenda. And the other thing is, I just want to remind everyone that it got a little chaotic at the last meeting because people were talking without being recognized. And so I'm just asking people to please wait to be recognized. And if I don't see your hand right away, maybe I'm looking down, taking notes, jotting something down, but I will get to you. So I ask for your patience. Other than that, I don't have anything else to offer. So we'll move on to number 3, which is public comments. Lily, you want to come up? Please identify yourself.
Lily Tryman, Town Clerk. I just wanted to let everyone know that we were the recipient of a grant that I applied for in January. It's a National Endowment for the Humanities Preservation Assistance Grant for smaller institutions. And this grant is going to allow me to have a professional preservation needs assessment carried out by the Northeast Document Conservation Center. It's going to pay for Judy and I to attend an online interactive class in preservation, and it's going to purchase a sensor for the vault. So I'm very excited about this. My question about it is, who then signs the letter of commitment to the Northeast Document Conservation Center?
Oh, well, that probably is an agenda item, and then the board will discuss how to handle that. Most likely that will authorize the town manager
Okay,
to sign on behalf of the town. That's what we typically do.
that sounds great.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, get that into Brennan for the next packet and we'll take care of it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else have a public comment? Mary?
I went ahead and did another select board corner because the deadline came up.
I saw that. It was very
Very
good.
nice.
It
Thank
did have
you.
did have a typo, which was about Hemlock Road. It said 2013 instead of 2023. That's okay. But I'm willing to keep writing them, but I thought maybe the next one, because I like writing them, might be about the handbook or the open meeting law or something like that. So I wanted to open it up to see if other select board members would rather handle that. For instance, Marcia, because you got a lot to do with the handbook. So you could think about it. I'm not quite sure of the, the deadline for probably winter. But you could think it over whether that's a topic you'd like to do.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so I'll let Rose Trami know.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Marcia,
Yeah,
for taking care of that.
Thank you both.
Okay, any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to number 4, which is the subcommittee appointments. We have 2 subcommittees tonight, or committees, I guess, with the Trails Committee and the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. So I see that Craig is here again. I'm not sure anyone is here from Affordable Housing.
Fine.
Oh, that's right. Jan, you're here. Sorry. I've got my screen covered up. I need to get rid of that. Sorry. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure we need to have any discussion. Maybe we should start with Priscilla. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one thing. I was looking at the Trails Subcommittee, and we have some other stuff farther on about what they're doing. And there's this guy named Jerry Plummer, who authorized reimbursement to Jim Fonham or something. And I don't know who, I mean, he's probably a lovely man, but his name isn't anywhere on here as a member of the subcommittee. But he's authorizing work done.
Brennan, can you speak to that issue?
No, that might be one that I would pass on to Craig, although I'm not seeing Craig here.
He's here in the audience.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
here.
Okay.
He's here in the
So
room.
I'm not familiar with that gentleman either. I assumed, again, this is a project that was being reimbursed through a women's club grant, and that we were paying this kind of reimbursement from the funds that came into the town. And after the materials were ordered and collected, they were going to go back out to the person who put his own money on the line to get those materials. So I don't know the gentleman either, but obviously we're authorizing the payment tonight as a town board.
Right. Craig, would you like to come up and tell us what Jerry Plummer's role is? I know him, he's a neighbor, but I don't know his role in the Trails Committee.
Yeah, Craig Lane on the Norwich Conservation Commission, 782 Tiger Town. Jerry's one of the Trails volunteers for years, does a lot of the mapping and website work. And the Trails volunteers have, in cooperation, he worked with Cody Williams from the Conservation Commission, and they put in the request for a grant from the Women's Club. So he's involved because he wrote the grant for the Women's Club. And then it came back and nobody was left on the committee that exactly knew how funds went from the Women's Club grant through the town to someone who had spent their money on something. So he wrote asking how that happens.
Okay, I think what caught Priscilla's eye was it says approved by Jerry Plummer, and yet he's not on the Trails Committee or the Conservation Committee. So I think that's where the question arose from.
Yeah, like Brennan, I can't speak to that because I didn't know that he did or tried or did anything approving.
The vendor is Jim Fonham.
I can answer this.
Roger, go ahead.
So in a short way, there is a memo that was authored by Steve Flanders, who was previously of this Trails Committee. And the schema for this subcommittee of a committee was that there were volunteers and then there were members. And the volunteers did not participate as members, but they participated as volunteers. And so it was the way at the time to ensure people would be comfortable participating in a way that allowed them to be active, but not subject to the membership of a committee. So there's a written document, and I'll send it to you. It's exactly the kind of issues that we've been speaking about in terms of subcommittees and open meeting law, but it's it was conceived in a legal but possibly unethical way. But we love the Trails Committee, so maybe it doesn't matter.
Okay,
We're hoping to remedy that tonight.
okay. All right. Marcia, go ahead.
So, one of the things that we should have thought about, before, but I'm thinking about it now with these committees, is that, for example, the Conservation Commission is listed as having 9 members approved by its board. And by my count, with the Trails Committee, that would up that to 12. So I would think that what we have to do is also amend the number of members that are approved for committees when we approve these.
But the Trails Committee is not part of the Conservation Committee. Did I misunderstand you?
So are you, where's their parent?
It is.
Where's their what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What was the word? Where's the what?
It's under Conservation Commission.
Under
Right,
Conservation, so that's the parent group, right?
right.
True.
So
But the
Conservation
subcommittee
Commission,
can,
I
Go
guess
ahead.
this is why we've been having these conversations. And I think the example of the spending of money is a good one because we want to be sure that the people who are representing the town and spending money on behalf of the town are authorized to do that. And presumably that should be done through the chair of the committee. And that's why I think the charges are important. But I think what we need to consider tonight are the number of members that we're appointing in total when we bless these committees. And then I think in terms of the structure of the committees, one of the things that the select board should be reminding the parents when we get to that stage of this process is how we're going to keep track of who's authorized to spend money and how that works.
Right. Well, Jim Fawnin is a member of the Trails Committee. And so he was the one that spent the money, but the question became, who is Jerry Plummer, who has approved this expenditure because he's not on the Conservation Commission or the Trails Committee. He's a volunteer. And so that's probably an area where we need to tighten things up a little bit.
That's what I said, I think.
Okay.
I mean,
Roger, go ahead.
further to that, I mean, I just think like, what are the obligations and concerns for volunteers of the town, right? So if you have amazing, brilliant, very strong volunteers building trails, but then what is our protections to them as people who are working under the auspices of the town of Norwich, right? What protections do we offer these volunteers when they go out and build these trails and use equipment, presumably? And then what liability do they waive away? I understand that there is something on file in the office and there is some process, but I have never seen it. And you know, if volunteers of a town sound like a town manager's prerogative or a department's prerogative, but perhaps a committee that meets and makes decisions and spends money is maybe something different altogether. So, or not, I don't know. And I don't want to tease it out without all the information because obviously that could be potentially insulting to people who are doing a lot of good work, but it needs to be resolved.
I think we have gaps, and that's what Marcia's alluding to, is that we need to figure out how to fill those gaps. Marcia, go ahead.
So I would suggest that for tonight, for going forward, we do what needs to be done in terms of blessing committee members, but also approve an increased number of the members of the Conservation Commission. And then sort of pledge to ourselves that we need a bigger process, which I think is a step back before we start looking at individual committees to think about the things Roger just brought up, liability and, you know, how the, our coverage with the attorneys and insurance policies would fit. And also, whatever is on file in in Brennan's office, we need to know if that's gonna hold water, because usually waivers of liability don't hold water. But I think that what I'm saying is, I think we need to just stick to the simple things tonight and then commit to figuring out the overarching structure that we need to worry about, and then look at each committee.
Okay, thank you. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, Jan Lasbrev, Planning Commission Chair. I just wanted to address the point around needing to increase the number of members. Because my reading of the legal opinion that we got, which said the select board can appoint members to an advisory group, and there were definition of advisory groups, sure sounded to me like those were separate advisory groups with members appointed. And we should talk about what it means to report to or come under the Planning Commission, but I don't think of them at all as increasing the number of members of the Planning Commission or of the Conservation Commission. They are separate groups appointed by the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I didn't understand that if you were a member of a subcommittee of another committee or board, that you had to be a part of the membership of the parent board or commission or committee. That I find that a little confusing too. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make the kind of technical note that if you were to increase the number of members of the parent committee, that would increase the quorum requirements for that committee, which could be a real problem with getting a quorum. So I think that could pose a problem for making official actions.
That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, any other comments before we move on to these? Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear Brennan's opinion, what he thinks about that.
Brennan, go ahead.
So I think my reading was similar to, I think, what Jan expressed, which is you would have subcommittees that are being appointed by this board with their own specific charges, but that would not increase the number of planning commission members in that scenario, or the conservation committee. Those would be held at the same number that were appointed originally to that specific commission or committee. So I don't think you would want to expand, because then basically everybody on a subcommittee would be a voting member of a commission or committee that is their parent, and I don't think that's the intention.
Okay, thank you. Marcia?
Point taken. I do think we need to revisit in the future with the town manager and council about the liability of, and sort of what form of creature is a volunteer? How does it fit? That sort of thing. I think that's a huge gap. Thank you.
Yeah, most committees, it's not dangerous work that they're doing, but the Trails Committee, if they're going out using equipment and whatever, that's a different type of volunteerism that has inherent risk to it. So, yeah, certainly with the Trails Committee, that should be looked at. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion for the Trails Committee.
I move to create the Trails Committee under the Norwich Conservation Commission and appoint the following members: Craig Lane to a term ending March 2025, Jim Farnham and Nick Krems to a term ending March 2026, and Cody Williams, Bob Fiskin, and Peter Griggs to a term ending March 2027.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, there's no further discussion. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
I'm gonna vote no. I'm not sure if these are volunteers or if these are members or if they want to be members, or I have no idea what's going on with this group. If they even want to be a subcommittee under a parent, so I'm voting no.
All right, and I'm a yes. So 4 yes, 1 no. Okay, and then we have the Affordable Housing Subcommittee on. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to create the Affordable Housing Subcommittee under the Planning Commission and appoint the following members: Jeff Lubell and Gordon Greenfield to a term ending March 2025, Brian Loeb and Chris Moffett to a term ending March 2026, and Jeff Goodrich to a term ending March 2027.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Right. Jan, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Well, I would just ask that as we go forward talking about things in the handbook and these subcommittees, we need definition and clarity on what it means to be under the Planning Commission or under the Conservation Commission. I think it's confusing or could be confusing for these groups. We certainly should go ahead and get the legal appointment done, but I think it's worth more discussion around what it means to be associated with a separate group while being appointed by the Select Board.
All right, thank you. All right, any other comments? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
Hello?
I guess Marcia has a comment.
Well, if you would put your hand up rather than raise your physical hand, it'd be easier to see that you're asking to be recognized. Go ahead.
Will do.
Thank you.
So Jan's question is a good one, and I'm looking at the bylaws here, and I'm just wondering what we're doing at this moment is only talking about the membership and appointing those people. We're not talking about bylaws, correct?
Jan, you want to answer that question? Are you talking about bylaws or are you talking about just a definition?
I mean, about our
I think so. Two things. For the Affordable Housing Subcommittee has the members that you've just made a motion to, and it has a standing charter that the Select Board approved about 20 years ago. So I don't think you're doing anything related to that charter right now. That board approved it 20 years ago. I believe Jeff Lubell and the group are looking at charter amendments because it's 20 years old. Those amendments would be approved by the Select Board, but they would come to you at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Marcia?
So that didn't answer my question. Right now, the motion is only about appointing the people. It's not including anything about these so-called bylaws.
Right, that's correct.
I don't know what you
Yes.
mean by bylaws if you're asking me. Whose
Well,
bylaws, what bylaws?
I'm sorry, Jan, I didn't understand what you said.
He's asking you, what do you mean by bylaws?
I'm looking at page 5 of the packet, and it says Town of Norwich Affordable Housing Committee bylaws.
All right, so I'm sorry, that's what I was calling charter, and Jeff Lubell can talk to that better than I can.
Okay, can follow up?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so my concern is that Dylan's rule, basically, that we can't do anything that is not allowed by statute. And lots of these things here, like creating zoning districts. I mean, I guess if you're assisting, but those by statute belong to the Planning Commission. So and bylaws mean in the world of planning, as Jeff and Jan know, that means zoning regulations. So I don't see in the statutes anywhere that there is room or authorization for this kind of quote charter or bylaws. So I think that has to be parked at the moment. What I was looking for was, the charge. And if you look back at the Stitzel and Page and Fletcher work, the Planning Commission is supposed to be needing help from the groups or whoever it is that they want to appoint to help them. right? And then it's the planning commission that does that work. So a simple charge is what I think is appropriate, but notwithstanding this may have longevity of 20 years, it doesn't mean it passes statutory muster.
Right, it may be that this was written so long ago that it doesn't conform with current thinking. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's worth looking at that document, and as you'll see in the packet, we've been having some conversations about how to update it. And I think those updates do address Marcia's question, but my suggestion is, as I understood the motion, it did not involve approving a charter or not approving a charter. You're just simply, appointing members to something. So perhaps that issue can be parked, as Marcia suggested, and you move forward with appointing members, and we can come back to you with a bylaws update and have you formally adopt updated bylaws at a future date.
Right, yeah, it's my understanding, we're just bringing you in under the umbrella of being appointed by the board. So yeah, this issue of charter or charge or bylaws or whatever can be at a future date. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes,
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, great, thank you. And thank you to everyone who serves on these committees.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, number 5, Town Clerk CTCL grant letter. Lily, would you like to come up?
Lily Tryman, Town Clerk.
Okay, everyone has seen your letter. And I guess I would ask if anyone has any questions for you about this grant. Did I see your hand go up, Marcia?
yeah. I was
Yeah,
trying
go
to
ahead.
find the raised
That-
hand. Yeah, so I read about this grant and I see that there's some controversy surrounding these grants based on the source of their funding, Zuckerberg's particularly. And there are a lot of caveats on their website about checking with local laws. So I'm wondering a couple things. Have other towns in Vermont have applied for these grants? Have there been any lawsuits in Vermont that you're aware of? And why doesn't your budget satisfy your need?
So there are other towns in Vermont that have applied for and gotten these grants. So there has been, as far as I know, no lawsuits or controversies involving them. And the budget that I have does not budget for some immediate needs that we have to run upcoming elections. In particular, our giant metal folding poll booths, which if you look them up online are characterized as being American poll booths from the 1950s to the 1970s, are at their end of life. Their curtains are unwashable and unsalvageable. So we haven't budgeted for that. I can certainly put it in next year's budget if this grant doesn't go through, but it seemed like it was a good source of funding for an immediate need. The other things these would budget for are a laptop and a printer so that I can stop using my personal laptop when I'm working elections and instead take day of registrations and print out those registration certificates at the polls. And then in conversation with Judy and Ben, there are a few other things that are useful for running the elections.
Okay, any other questions? Marcia, did you have another question?
Nope, lowering hand.
Okay, all right, any other questions for Lily? Mary?
If you are awarded the grant, when would it be?
They review them and disperse them within about 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Does that mean you would have this equipment for the next election?
Indeed.
That would be wonderful.
Very nice.
Okay, any, Marcia, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, grants are generally the, meat and potatoes of the town manager's office. So I'm wondering what would be the burden on your office, if any, who's doing the reporting, all that sort of stuff.
I can only speak for myself when I say I would be doing the reporting. The grant is set up so that the person requesting the grant is the primary point of contact. The town would have to would have to accept the funds when they're transferred over. And that's I believe, sum total of what the town would need to do. In talking with other clerks, this has not been a complicated grant. They seem very willing to hand out money up to $5,000 to help with elections.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none. I'm sorry, Roger.
I guess my only comment is sounds fine, sounds great. I would hope that we would have a budgeting process for a purchase of something as essential and officey as a laptop computer. So it sounds like this one may or may not be unique and assigned for just election duties, but I guess sounds like we would need a grant. It sounds like a grant for replacing our election equipment is worthy, but to have an additional laptop computer seems like something that should be part of a budget that we provide for regularly. But I don't want to, that's the prerogative of the town manager's office with the clerk. So I digress.
Okay,
Can I respond?
certainly.
So laptops in this case were specifically mentioned as hardware that's allowable under the grant.
Yeah, no, I understand it's allowable. I'm just surprised that we need to use a grant for something as essential as a laptop for office
I
work.
certainly don't have that in my budget for this year. So.
Wild. But anyway, that's just a note for our budgeting.
Okay. All right, if there are no other comments, I would entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the town clerk to apply for a Center for Tech and Civic Life grant of up to $5,000 for a laptop computer, printer, a set of 12 new stand-up voting booths, and any other supplies deemed necessary.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, if there are no further comments, Mary, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Priscilla,
Yes.
Marcia,
Yes, nervously.
Roger?
Yes.
I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, great. Thank you, Lily. Thank you. Good luck. Okay. Now we're on to item number 6. So this is going to be an interesting discussion. I just wanted to say that while it's true that the select board passed a motion on February 14 that was a non-binding recommendation, clearly the listers do not feel that they have the authority to make an adjustment in the western boundary as requested by the landowner. And so my suggestion tonight is that we follow the statute 24 VSA 1461 and reach out to the Sharon Select Board, the other legislative body, and start a conversation about how we might resolve a problem that's existed for at least the last 20 years. So we have a lot of material here in the packet and some materials that came in after the deadline from both the listers and from the landowner. And so I will open up the floor to any questions or comments that board members would like to make. Mary?
It makes sense to me to resolve this so that there's a clear, straight boundary. I guess questions are, what is the boundary going to be and what do the other landowners along the line think about, the effect it will have on their property? But I think in the statute, it requires a survey of citizens to get information about that.
Right, the statute calls for the legislative bodies to meet and come to an agreement if they can. And once that happens, then there is to be public hearings in both towns and a survey, and then all of this is submitted to the state for approval. And clearly, we haven't done any of those steps at this point.
Yeah, follow up. So we wouldn't be gathering information, unless we did it informally, from the properties that are affected by this until later in this process, it sounds like. You know, it's like, it's got steps. So we meet with Sharon and see what they think. And, you know, we'd probably have to take a best guess about which of the lines. Are there three? There's at least two lines.
There are two lines.
There's two lines. The state and Sharon is one and Norwich is the other. Is that the way it is? I think that's the way it is, right?
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Your
So-
tax maps show crisscrossing lines.
Right.
Please
So,
wait to be recognized.
Pardon me.
so I'm just, you know, we can open up a conversation if that's what this board wants to do. I just think it should be resolved so that it's an actual boundary and not piece by piece, not because one landowner is concerned.
Right.
To me, that just makes sense as a process, so.
There's a map that was shared with us tonight here in the room by the listers that shows that if we were to change this boundary as requested, it would create a jog in the western boundary of Norwich. And I don't think that that's something that we could do and just. So, all right. You're all set? Okay,
you.
all right. I see Marcia's hand is up. Go ahead, Marcia.
So, the Vermont Society of Land Surveyors has a very good paper on town boundaries subsequent to the New Hampshire land grants. And it explains that all the work that was done by the Surveyor General, who is now defunct, and where that work went after they dissolved, basically the Secretary of State's office. And that excellent summary says that the law of town lines is really a series of legislative acts beginning in 1779 and continuing to the present. Takes the form of statutes directing how lines should be run, including the science, art, and licensing of land surveying and the laws of recording. Then there is a Vermont coordinate system, which is codified at 1 VSA 671 6 through 679. That began in 1945. And so the problem for me is that everything I read says, look at the survey. And in fact, the Vermont Bar Association document of title, standards of title says land surveys, related conveyances, accepted rules of construction, etc., are without objection should be relied upon to resolve ambiguous descriptions. So in this case, it looks to me like we've got property that had a valid survey in 1991, which happened after the law changed in I think it was 88, I've got that here somewhere, requiring surveys. And it looks like, to me, like the dispute is more between the listers and the Adams family than it is between towns. And that's my concern with the characterization. So, and the other thing is there's a Vermont Land Survey Library where now, after the law changed in January of 2020, any land line changes are required to be filed with them. And that is how data gets into the Vermont digital and GIS system. So I'm just thinking we don't have nearly enough information and we can't make an assumption that because there were general straight lines on a map when the New Hampshire land grants were invented, doesn't mean that that's what is correct. And I think before we approach any other town, which actually we've already done, we need more information because I don't see a dispute.
Well, I would say that this select board has not met with the Sharon Select Board, which I believe, I didn't look up the exact date, but there was a discussion about this about a year ago. And the direction was given to the town manager to coordinate a meeting between our select board and the Sharon Select Board, which has never happened. I understand that you and Brennan went and met with the Sharon listers, but that's not what the statute calls for. It's talking about legislative bodies. And
That's
so the
not what-
legislative bodies have not met. And so,
Correction, that's not what happened. Brennan can speak to what did happen, and
but there was no meeting of the Sharon Select Board with the Norwich Select Board.
no, this is a remedy statute that Cheryl's put in front of us. If we determine that we think that there's a dispute, this statute says this is how you remedy it. I think that's jumping the gun. We need to figure out if there is a dispute. And when we talk, and I'd like Brennan to talk about this, but, you know, basically, there wasn't a dispute. Not with
I guess I don't understand your definition of the word dispute. If a property owner disputes their tax bill because they feel like they're being double taxed in two towns, that is a dispute. They're disputing the mapping of their property in Norwich. And therefore they're disputing their tax bill, saying they're being taxed on acreage that they feel is no longer considered in the town of Norwich.
This statute is about municipal lines.
Right. And we don't know where that line is. There seems to be two separate opinions on where the line is. So I would consider that a dispute, but that's my definition. Brennan, go ahead.
Thanks. So I just a couple comments here because we have spent a fair amount of time and effort trying to understand this over the last year and a half. I think it really shines a spotlight on the fact that a professional assessor working in the lister's office would really solve a lot of problems here, because this, I think, was brought up by Mr. Potter when he was serving in that role in an email that was shared, I think, in the packet. And it basically said, you may have a problem here. And then he left, is no longer available. And we've kind of been banging around in the dark here since then, I believe. So we did, after the select board asked that we contact Sharon to talk with them about a possible dispute around this Adams property. We reached out. I actually reached out and spoke with the clerk, who referred me to the lister's office and said that's who you should be talking with about a boundary dispute of any kind. And we did that. And we had several productive discussions with the listers in Sharon. I contended then, and I believe they're feeling the same, that there is not a disputed border between the towns, that there is a dispute around the specific property in which 2.4 acres are in Norwich and should be taxed by Norwich, and the rest of that property is in Sharon and is being taxed by Sharon. And that's what came to the board back in February. That's where the motion to recommend that the listers remedy the double taxation for the Adams family came. So, you know, I guess that's where we are today. Again, I don't understand why we, the town of Norwich, would be disputing property lines that are going to be disadvantageous to the town. I mean, in the lines that are being shown by the listers, we are going to lose two homesteads potentially unwillingly, homesteads that would want to remain in Norwich. And I guess I don't know why we would do that. That's going to hurt our grand list, unless, again, one of those homesteads came to the town and said, I should be in Sharon. Your border is wrong, and you need to remedy this. Lastly, I will say that I have on my desk, and was shown this afternoon for the first time, a 1951 survey of the western border between Norwich and Sharon. And it is a straight line. And obviously properties cross that line. And it also appears, going back to 2006, 2007, when a property was transferred there or a subdivision occurred, that there was an error by the listers, and that's where this got classified with the incorrect acreage. So if we could just stick with the very simple fact that we have a property owner here who is trying to remedy double taxation, which I believe is what the Adams family is trying to remedy and has been now for many months. I think this is a simple solution tonight. That's all I have.
Well, I would disagree that we should consider what impact this will have on our grand list. That should not be a part of the equation. This should be trying to get to the correct information. And at the bottom of Spencer Potter's letter, he says, it is likely that the Adams acre in question may be sold in the near future and the buyer may want to build on the disputed land. What town should issue a building permit? What town would the owners reside in? This is not an easy issue and may involve the Select Board and the Vermont State Legislature. I was a lister when this first came up, and I recall having the conversation with Spencer that this was something that was going to have to be resolved between the two select boards, and that if we could come to an agreement, it would have to go to the state legislature for approval. So if Spencer were still here, I'm sure he would still have that same opinion, that this is not something as simple as just saying, we're going to put a jog in the western border of Norwich and consider those 8 acres part of Sharon and ignore the rest of the properties that are part of that. He clearly told us that there were 21 parcels impacted by this, and that it was something that had to be resolved between the select boards. And if we couldn't resolve it, then the state would resolve it. Roger, go ahead.
I mean, I think we should actually, there was a summary that Marcia provided about who is this dispute between, and I thought that was like pretty cogent for the situation. This isn't a dispute between municipalities. It would make sense that it would be considered a dispute between the property owner and the listers, but it is not, the remedy to solve that dispute is not us redrawing our lines with Sharon. It would be an inappropriate escalation for that recorded dispute, at least an inappropriate escalation, if not inappropriate action. Like, you know, like it's, why would we look to do that? I don't particularly understand. And also there's no new information. This is literally the exact same conversation we've been having at the last time we talked about this issue. And I kind of don't appreciate the insistence.
It's been an issue for 20 years.
The insistence of board members who've held previous roles to continue to put this on the agenda. Yeah.
And I put it on the agenda because of the advice that the listers received from the contract assessor, that this was something that needed to be resolved between the two select boards.
But that is not.
That is the advice that we were given. I was there. I heard him say this.
That is not new information, and that was not our directive.
So why aren't we following the advice of the professionals?
We should be following the advice of our own work. We directed the town manager to research this question. He came back and delivered a conclusion that there was no further action needed. So it's just procedurally like, so I'm raising objections on a procedural level that this is like sort of inappropriate as an agenda item to continually revisit things because we don't like the results or the outcomes, right? Like that's really inappropriate.
It's not about not liking the outcome. It's that we don't have anything.
Okay, all right, I digress. Certainly.
Marcia, go ahead.
So all of the authority says that you rely on the surveys. Is Cheryl saying, or whoever is in the lister's office, are they saying that Aurelius DiBernardo's survey was wrong?
It says approximate town line, approximate. It doesn't say definitive.
Well, we're supposed to rely on surveys. That's the point. So that survey was filed in 1991, and it stood all this time. And presumably there are other surveys along that line. But I don't see anybody here complaining, except the poor Adams family.
If you looked at the material in the packet that we received from the listers, this change was made in 2007. There was a letter that went out. It's Town of Norwich Grand List, real equipment change of appraisal.
That was a grievance, right?
No, there's a list, and it's this one that says, Town of Norwich Grand List, real equipment, change of appraisal report. The second one down, Anthony Adams, all unimproved land revalued in 2007. New tax maps indicate 10.4 acres.
So the tax maps are generated, as I understand it, from the surveys. So what I would like to know is, are these surveys sent into this Vermont database? And then what do we have? You know, tax maps themselves are not definitive. And again, I don't see why we're having a problem with a valid survey, apparently, that stood from 1991.
Well, in 2007, the grand list was changed to reflect 10.4 acres.
That's a different issue. Was there a new survey? Where was the survey then?
I don't know why it was changed in 2007. I'm just reading from a report that
Right.
was generated from the system.
So was there a survey?
I can't answer that question.
No, there was no survey.
So the only survey that we have that's valid is from 1991. And you know what it says.
Which says that there's an approximate town line on the survey. It does not say it's definitive.
That's, you know, deeds always say that. More or less, approximately.
Brennan has his hand up.
Brennan, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
So again, just to maybe shed a little more information here. So again, we have a survey, a legal survey from 1951 that shows that western boundary. And the mapping lines on these GIS programs are admittedly vague and imprecise. So I would suggest if we're going to use anything, it should be based on legal surveys that we've had in the past for decades. I would also just point out that, information that was shared was that this parcel, this Chapel Hill parcel, was listed as 2.4 acres of land up until, I have information here going back to 1999. And I'm working my way through this up until
It was until 2007 when the new tax maps.
2006, it was 2.4.
Right.
2007, it went up to 10.4. There was a
Right.
transfer of, I believe, 8 acres of land in that same time period. I think that was the error that was made here. I think 2.4 was probably the correct number that should have remained with this parcel up till now, and that this double taxation has occurred again now for almost 20 years because that error was not corrected and grievances apparently occurred, but no resolution ever occurred. So again, that's very specific to this one parcel of land. But to me, that's the issue that should be resolved here. It shouldn't be, we need to redraw a new boundary. Maybe we both have the same boundary as on that 1951 survey, and the GIS maps are just a little bit off on either side. I mean, that's a possibility as well.
Right, and so my goal here is to try to answer that question. Where is the western boundary of the town of Norwich?
Why can't the listers answer it? They get paid hourly now, for the love of God. Like, go answer the question. It's their job. Go do it. Do your work.
Unfair statement. Mary, go ahead.
So with our first question, just say we did approach Sharon, maybe our first question is, do you recognize this 1951 survey? I assume this is the entire western boundary, not just the boundary of one property?
Yeah, I believe it goes from the Hartford corner all the way up through Thetford.
So if they said
It's an old map pieced together on various pieces of paper, so it's a little hard to understand exactly where these lot lines are on that map, but there's certainly a straight contiguous line that goes all the way from a pin here to a pin there with landmarks along the way. So it would
This
seem,
reminds me of when lawyers do title work, they go down through, but it sounds like 1951, it was officially surveyed with markers and everything else, right? And the discrepancy came later, but if Sharon agreed to that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe the point of Marcia and Brennan and Roger, so why go to that extent? You know, if you already have that knowledge of that survey, why bother? But I don't know, clear the air?
Maybe we should be reaching out to town council to help us guide us through this.
Well, I mean, if Sharon listers or select board agreed that that 1951 survey is what they understand, that would also do the trick, I think.
But I think it's clear that this isn't just one parcel that would be impacted by that survey. It would be 21 parcels that are along that western border.
Do we know where that line is?
No,
That 1951 line?
I've never seen what Brennan is talking about. He said he just got it today. So,
Yeah. So irresponsible.
It was shared to me by the assistant town clerk, and it was shared apparently with the lister's office back in March. So I think this information has been known.
The assistant town clerk of Sharon?
No, Judy Trussell.
Judy Truss, okay.
Priscilla?
Excuse me for being stupid, but you know, I'm looking at these pictures that show, you know, here's a sort of an aerial shot, and here's a town line, and here's the town line. And maybe Sharon is thrilled with it, maybe we're thrilled with it, maybe we're not, but there seem to be two town lines, and I don't see what's the harm. In fact, I think it'd be helpful to talk to the Sharon Select Board and say, you know, do you know where your town line is? Do we know where our town line is? Because if they seem to overlap, and this is going to create a problem. So why wouldn't we want to go talk to the Sharon people and see where they stand on this? And it'd be nice to see this 1951 survey. I mean, you know, I'm looking at this picture. I don't know what date are these lines from? And we did see some evidence in the packet of places where the tags had been torn off and not so good. And so I don't know if we really know, if anybody really knows where the line is. I think it'd be good to find out.
I agree. Marcia?
I think we should use the resources of the state and ask the Secretary of State's office where things are kept. And also ask the Vermont Center for Land Surveys to see what they have, their library. And then, you know, give that to Brennan and see if there's anything, you know, if there's a case in controversy. I know, Brennan, I'm sorry. But, you know, basically, we're knocking on somebody else's door and saying, it looks like, you know, it looks like from what Brennan just said, there was a mistake done in the lister's office some years ago when there was that transfer of 8 acres. And so maybe we could even have another lister, an outside lister, look at that and see if it was done properly. But I think that's even irrelevant because surveys are what matter. That's what the law says. So let's see what the state has on file for surveys before we knock on Sharon's door and say, we think there's a problem with an entire boundary line. Are we then going to start looking at Thetford and Hartford? Do we, you know, New Hampshire?
I think our eastern border is quite clear.
No, there's accretion. The river is always moving.
But it's the river, wherever it lands. So
There's a lot of law on that, actually.
But I think this is something that is unresolved. I think the listers feel very uncomfortable in making that change without having the proper documentation to show that what they're doing is correct. And I think it behooves us as the legislative body to pursue this information and try to give them an answer on where this boundary really lies. I don't think we just talk to the listers in the other town and they say, oh yeah, we're fine with it. You know, go ahead. And we just accept that carte blanche. Marcia?
So let's say that the other town says that the boundary is just fine. What's your next step? You're going to sue them? You're going to follow this procedure? How much money are we going to spend? And how are we going to notify all of these other property holders that the town sua sponte is going to see if they can get them, their properties changed into another town?
We can't do that. We have to go through the state and get the state legislature to change that boundary.
That's what I
And-
was
and-
saying. Are we gonna go through all that expense?
If we can agree with the Sharon Select Board where the boundary is, we just submit it to the state. And ask the state
Why don't
to.
we
put their
start with the
stamp of
state?
approval
Why don't
on
we
it.
start with the state and ask what they have on file? All the charters and anything that's been put in there. And we might also find out if things have been done properly or if things have not been done properly. That
And
would be
who are,
important
who are you,
information.
who are you proposing will do that?
Well, unfortunately, the town manager is the person who does the work for our town.
We have no assessor, no planner, so alas, Brennan. Wild.
Okay.
Can imagine why we-
Brennan, go ahead.
Well, I guess I would just comment that the state's going to have what we provided to the state at some level, right? And I assume that 1951 survey of that western border is something that they would hopefully have a record of. I think, we've done this already. Like, I feel like we've explored this last year when this was first brought to our attention, and I was asked to research it, and I talked to assessors and I talked to listers, and I think we came up with the solution that you go by the survey. This property in question has a survey that shows that only 2.4 acres are in Norwich. We should be taxing them only for 2.4 acres in Norwich. And that was kind of where we left it until, again, this thing just keeps getting dragged back out, which I feel is wasting our time and our energy in many cases. So could I spend another 20 hours trying to research what the state did, 40 years ago when this GIS technology came out and they started to map things on computers? Yeah, but they've got a disclaimer that says these lines are approximate anyway. It's going to be based on a survey, which we have. So I would be interested in hearing the listers of Norwich's opinion on why we're back here today. And I believe we have guests in the audience from the Adams family that might want to speak to it as well. So I'm all in my discussion at that point. Thanks.
Okay. Priscilla, go ahead.
I don't feel that this is resolved at all. It seems to me that what happened was this issue came up, and without any particular discussion from the rest of the board, the chair and the town manager went off to Sharon to go meet with some people and didn't really tell us about what they found, and sort of came out in bits. So I don't feel that the full board has been kept above board and in on this whole thing. And I mind that very much. I also will say I mind the implications that the listers are faulty and erroneous and sloppy in their work.
Thank you,
Point of-
Priscilla. Marcia, go ahead.
Point of order. I never traveled to Sharon. I would have loved to have seen Sharon, but I didn't. Brennan was doing what the board asked, which was to have a meeting. And I happened to be in the vicinity and said, do you mind if I join you? That's what happened. Then Brennan reported this to the select board, and the select board in February decided there was no case in controversy.
The direction to the town manager was to set up a meeting between the two select boards. It wasn't to go to Sharon and meet with anybody and everybody that will just talk to you, whether it's the town clerk, the listers, or whomever. It was direction to establish a meeting between the two select boards. It's in the minutes. I just didn't go back and find the specific date of those minutes, but I remember seeing it. I saw a hand go up here in the room. I think it's time to hear from the listers. Cheryl, did you want to come up and say something?
Yeah, sure.
Point of order.
Yes.
Brennan contacted them and the select board, he said that earlier, but he said it at the time. The select board referred him to the listers.
He said the clerk referred him to the listers.
Right. And so it wasn't possible, but Brennan can answer this.
But he didn't report back to the board that he had made the attempt and it wasn't possible. So I'm going to move on to the listers.
Yes, he
We've
did.
not heard from them at this point, and I would like to hear from the listers. Cheryl, go ahead.
Yes, I think Cheryl Lindbergh, Lister, and I just would like to start off with saying that we were looking for support and respect in handling a matter. We weren't trying to cause more work for anybody. But when this came to our attention from Spencer Potter, and his email is clear at what he recommended to the Board of Listers, we wrote a memo to the Select Board immediately and put that in front of you to have you address that which we were told in this email. That sat on your to-do list for a long time. And eventually it got to an agenda item and the listers weren't even invited to be a part of that discussion. But in the meanwhile, I, as a non-hourly lister, spent a lot of time with the Adams family and the listers in Sharon talking about this topic. And you only hear, you hear what you hear, I hear what I hear. In speaking with the listers in Sharon, they acknowledged that those houses that are in this disputed area are probably in Sharon. They acknowledged that in my conversation with them. So that gave me more concern about what was being decided when in fact these homes are really in Sharon, but want the benefits of Norwich. So Sharon listers looked the other way and didn't require those houses to be, yes, faces can look like you want, Brendan. You can look like what you want, Roger. I'm telling you the truth about what Galen, a lister in Sharon, told me over the phone. We looked the other way when those houses were built. We knew they were on the Sharon line and they should have been Sharon homes. So that's the information I have. To this day, Brendan has never come in the lister's office or invited us to his to discuss any of the information about what we know to compare with what he found out from the Sharon listers. We've had no discussion with Brendan about this as Norwich listers and the town that he works for. It's really discouraging. We today still haven't had a discussion with him, nor have he invited us to speak with him. Do we know anything about what he knows? Nothing. This was not meant to be this type of a situation. It was never meant to be, disrespectful or ugly. We brought forth to you what I thought today at this meeting was additional information to allow you to understand that this has been going on for over 20 years. Nobody wants this resolved more quickly than I do. And I don't really care what the resolution is. I just need it resolved. And I know as a lister and the Board of Listers know, we cannot make this decision. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it off to all of you before the meeting. I did hand one to Mary, Priscilla, and Pam, what it would look like if this line were to change. And it changes with a jog that takes out the 8 acres or whatever it is. That's all I can show you at this point of what it would look like. To my knowledge, to Ernie's knowledge, he's been a lister before, he's a lister now. There are no, what are the things that the state of Vermont, the secretary?
Well, I've done a lot of.
Why don't you come up?
Bring a chair.
I've done Ernie Chickatelli lister. I actually started working on this, I think it was last fall when my friend and fellow lister, John Vincent, brought this issue up. And it was an interesting issue because as a lawyer, it involves records and the sort of thing I do, which is, among other things, a lot of real estate stuff. So this to me was just a challenge that I took on personally. I mean, so I'm coming at this a bit differently than other people. So first thing I did is I called the Secretary of State's office because I figured that's where the records for boundaries are kept. And it is a place where the records for town boundaries are kept. And they also laid out for me in a conversation, in the same conversation, how boundaries get recorded, If there are changes, how those changes are recorded and who has to deal with them. Everyone's said the right thing so far. It's always been, it's either the select boards come to an agreement and that's recorded, but it still has to go through a court process too, by the way. Even though there's an agreement, there's a court process, my understanding is. And I still have more research because this is just interesting to me. So keep in mind that I'm just telling you what I've learned so far. There's a court process. Even if the towns agree, then there has to be an approval of their agreement, either so that the state has a record. Now, all of this is about written records. We're all talking about maps and so on and so forth. But as any real estate attorney will tell you, what you're really looking at is the meets and bounds that are written down. And then there's nowadays people required to put a plat in that matches those meets and bounds, okay? So I don't know if anyone has any questions, because I'm not sure. This is kind of technical and not clear necessarily, but it's the records, the written records that matter. So the very first thing you start with any set of subdivisions, which the town is a set of subdivisions. First of all, is a subdivision of a large land mass that was done by the Crown in 1791. And I think you have copies of, and it clearly states there are three for Norwich, starting at a boundary. There's one straight line at one bearing, another straight line for another bearing, and that one that says is exactly 6 miles long, and then another boundary, straight boundary that goes to the river, and then the fourth boundary is the river itself. Now, what the Secretary of State's office told me is, first of all, what they call adjudications. Whenever there's been a dispute or any kind of changes in the boundaries, they consider it an adjudication, and they keep records of all the adjudications in the state. And the person who was talking to me said he did the research, because it took a couple of phone calls. He did the research. There are no adjudications of the boundary line between Norwich and Sharon. He said there's nothing that has changed, nothing on the record that has changed the boundaries. So the boundary should be a straight line that goes from one corner of town to the other, and it matches also the other. They set up a grid, if you can see it. If you look at all the towns, it's kind of a grid arrangement. And as best the cartographers could do, they went straight lines and everything sort of joins at a nice little corner and all that sort of stuff. But what we see in a lot of maps now, and I only brought this as a sample because so that I can sort of, because I can point to that map right there too, that map there. You see there's a tiny bit of a jog here. Now, if you compare the straight line, let's assume this corner, the southwestern corner and the northwestern corner of Norwich. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. I'm got it backwards. I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay, if you go with a straight line, what you have is an extremely shallow triangle. Okay, very, very acute triangle. And most of it's in the sort of northern corner of Norwich. If you look at what you've got, you see two boundaries, and they look like parallel lines, but they're not. If those two corners match, and then you see this third point, which is the little notch, you see that it's not a straight line, which that shouldn't have been changed because there's no record of change from the straight line that the cartographers came up with, and the straight line between the 2 points that you can draw. Now, whether things have moved or gotten more accurate, we can't tell. It'd probably be wise to have a survey done, but this jog is not. There's no record of it, other than the 1951 blue line that Brennan's talking about. It does mention it, but I also saw another piece of history that shows that at some time, just a few years before this, somewhere in the order of 10 years before this, I don't remember the date, some Sharon road worker was putting a road in that sort of paralleled the Norwich border, the Norwich line. And he hit a boggy spot and rocks and stuff like that. So he just sort of made the road go around it. Well, then later from that, some surveyor went and thought that road was the boundary line or was close to the boundary line. And so he put in 3 pins, one at the corner, one at that apex of that triangle, and then the last one is the one down by Hartford. And so that's why we have 2, but it's such a shallow triangle that it looks like parallel lines when you zoom in, like from the atlas. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why it looks parallel. It's not parallel at all. And so you have to think the original charter says straight line. That means only 2 points, not 3. Okay. There is on some maps 3 points. Then you look, I contacted at the suggestion of the Secretary of State's office, the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, and their map showed both lines and a few other discrepancies from other towns with that other towns had. So, you know, and then when I called them, they said, well, they take information from all kinds of sources, and so different people give them different information, and so that can create error. But the point is that we do know that if nothing else, there's been no changes to the boundary line of Norwich since 1791, because there's no records of it. And so, you know, and these records are sort of large versions of when we do a subdivision. You know, when you transfer land or something like that, it's a record, it's written down, it's stored in the land records properly. And if it's not, and sometimes there are mistakes too. This town's experienced, there was a road that was it's not far from where I'm staying right now on Kendall Station Road. Kendall Station Road had drifted over years onto a resident's property. And there were 8 surveyors that the town had hired justifying the road, saying that we didn't have to move the road. And then in 2008, the Attorney General's office got involved, and they said, it's as clear as day, that road is in the wrong place. 8 surveyors got it wrong. And he was also wondering, how did 8 surveyors do that? Because that's a big mistake. I mean, you know, so surveyors make mistakes. So that's another principle here, is that, you know, nothing's perfect. But the other thing is that the boundary lines are not established by parcels that are strung along them or across them or anything like that. That has nothing to do with the boundary line. It's a state issue. I mean, you can have parcels cross boundary lines, but the state sets the boundary lines or records, and if it has to, it's the state that changes them. Like I said, no changes have been made. So the biggest problem the listers have is a dispute because there's a grievance, and it's you know, I mean, the people that want to change, they have an expectation because one lot settled with there's 2 lines right now, and they're hoping that, you know, the crooked line is what they want. And maybe somewhere there is an adjudication that slipped through the records. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine, because, you know, I mean, real estate records tend to be really, you know, accurate. And if they're not accurate, there's a problem and you fix it later. You know, this is not something that I don't think anyone would have let sit still if, you know, over time.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. Okay, Mary, go ahead.
This is all fascinating and pretty confusing.
It's fascinating.
What the listers want to get out of this discussion. Like what?
A resolution would be what we're looking for, is a resolution. And since our guidance from the prior assessor that worked in the office was that it was outside of our authority to resolve this, that we go to the select board and ask them for their help. And that's the genesis of this whole situation from last March, April of last year when it came to the select board in the first memo, which really didn't get to the select board agenda until February of this year. But that was what we wanted. We wanted to get it resolved. It's terrible for everybody, really, it is.
Well, if I could keep going a little bit. I think we'd all like to see it resolved. None of the select board are expert assessors, so we don't really have professional expertise. I just wonder, and I don't think Brennan's eager to go and research this. And it sounds like when Ernie did informal research, it almost, the waters seemed to get even a little more muddy as far as what he found out. You know, with the jog and the guy with the road, you know, that it's supposed to be a straight line since 1791. So it should be.
I'm sorry, 1761, by the way.
Oh,
I've been saying 79, well, there's still select thing going on.
But it should be more clear than it is, I suppose. But I just don't see a real easy or graceful way to resolve it. Maybe someone else has an idea.
Are you willing to listen to the landowner?
Eventually, yes, I'll call on you, certainly. Cheryl, go ahead.
So just to clarify again, if it was a parcel situation that we felt good about, we work on that and resolve it. This is a boundary line. So it takes it out of our authority from a parcel being of dispute to a boundary line because the parcel crosses the boundary line and we're trying to figure out how many acres.
Line is,
Or
right?
it doesn't cross the boundary line. I mean,
Right. You don't
from
know
what I
the
can
line
tell,
is.
it doesn't cross the boundary line.
You're not clear where the line is.
I mean,
What about the error that was made way back, the alleged error?
I'm just finding this out tonight, Mary. I don't understand the lack of communication. I wish there was more because it's very frustrating to come to a meeting and be criticized and laughed at as an elected official of a town that I've cared for a long time and be told that there's documentation now that I could have looked at.
Well,
So it's, you know, has to get better. And again, we can go back to the Sharon listers. We can sit down with them. If that's a step that seems reasonable, but I don't know what resolution will come out of it. But I've spent a lot of time on this and so has Ernie.
Right.
Jonathan too, but he's gone.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have is Sharon taxing these 21 parcels along the line that Norwich is taxing? Is there only one parcel that's being double taxed? Or are there 21 parcels that are being double taxed? We don't know the answer to that question either.
And again, it's just more of wanting to figure out. I'm curious about what Galen said to me still. It sits in my mind that, you know, that they know something, but they're ignoring it. So if they ignore that, you know, why is this parcel different? So again, maybe it's a matter of sitting with the listers again, only in face-to-face and going over paperwork to start the process. I don't know. I mean, any thoughts?
Go ahead.
I would like to hear from the landowner if he's willing, and you're willing.
Yeah, I see Brennan's hand is up and Marcia's hand is up, but I think maybe it is time to hear from the landowner. And
Is anybody with questions for us?
I don't think so at this point. Mr. Adams, would you like to come up and introduce yourself, please?
Mike Adams. The land in question is owned by my son, James. He's on active duty in the United States Army on exercises right now, and so was unable to zoom in.
We thank you.
He's delegated to me. The land was formerly owned by my brother, who bought it in 1999. With the survey that we're all talking about, the survey says 2.4 acres in Norwich. He bought the land. That was the deal. 2.4 acres were taxed in Norwich at that time. He has a deed that corresponds to that and a PTTR that corresponds to that. In 2004, he raised the valuation of the 2.4 acres with the then listers in Norwich, saying it's undevelopable land, so you're valuing it too high. That was agreed that according to Norwich's planning standards, it's not developable. 2007, out of the blue, my brother at this point is living in Hong Kong. Out of the blue, he gets the new tax bill that says now he has 10.4 acres in Norwich. Cheryl knows, we've discussed this. No, there's no record of how that happened. Frankly, from our perspective, looks like Norwich changed the boundary unilaterally in 2007 and said, oh, we're going to have 8 more acres. My brother grieved. The response about when the grievance date was mailed to him in Hong Kong. He got the letter long after the date. He was busy, he did nothing. Because the land was in current use at the time, the double taxation amount was not too onerous. Years go by, he transfers the property to my mother. Now, my mother last year is of an age where she's trying to get her affairs in order. And we own land adjacent to this land further into Sharon. Family built by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1858. Family decided that my son, the one who's in the Army, was going to be the one who was going to get the family house. And my mother approached my son and said, would you like to take this land that I have on the west side of Chapel Hill Road? And he said yes. So they did that. And she kept the 9.82 acres that's on the east side of Chapel Hill Road as something that she could sell. And it would be developed for a house, so there we are. So last year, this transfer happened. In the meantime, my brother, the whole issue about what is in Norwich, what is in Sharon arises, and the real estate agent advises him and my mother that the property can't be marketed because of this issue. So now my mother is agitated because she's now left with this land. She doesn't know what to do because the real estate agent calls Cheryl and says, is this resolved? And Cheryl correctly says it's not. So, and we've been through this long process. But what our position is, and we have consulted lawyers, and I guess I would request that you consult the town lawyer. We got clear advice from the lawyer. As Marcia said, the property survey by a licensed surveyor in Vermont, whether you like it or not, is the definitive legal standard. These tax parcel maps are not. If I go back to what Ernie said, if you look, because it's all online, so I've looked at it. If you look at the boundaries as depicted by the tax parcel maps, which is what we're talking about, the boundary doesn't just cross. It's not an acute triangle. It crisscrosses at least twice. All along there, at least twice. You can go look for yourself. I don't know how that happened. I accept there's never been a record of changing the town boundary since 1761. I accept that. But I believe that when these GIS tax maps were developed in the last 20 years, that they were not done precisely based on actual land surveys by licensed surveyors in the state of Vermont, which is what real estate is based on. We have a deed. We have a licensed survey. And we have a legal opinion that's telling us that that's what's definitive in Vermont. It's not the tax maps. What happened in 2007, how all of a sudden Norwich decided, oh, after all these years of saying it was 2.4 acres, we're now going to say it's 10.4 acres. I don't know. My brother doesn't know. And at the time he was far away, the land was in current use. So it was kind of one of these things that like somewhere down the line, we'll deal with it. Well, we're down the line and we're trying to deal with it. This year we grieved. The grievance was denied. We have appealed that. As you know, The BCA is now expected to hear this within 44 days of the date of our appeal, which was a few weeks ago. So in the next few weeks, we are expecting to meet all of you again in a BCA hearing. We would like to do that as a better process and how to advance this. We don't see this as a dispute of the whole town line. It's what happened to others. Nobody else is in dispute. Nobody else has an issue. Nobody does. We have an issue that we would like resolved. We have a survey and a deed and a PTTR that supports our position. We don't know how it was that in 2007, and Cheryl doesn't know, how it was that all of a sudden 2.4 acres in Norwich became 10.4. But we would like in the BCA process for you not to go to Sharon. It's a lot of time, expense, and energy when there's no other dispute. This is it. But please talk to the Norwich town lawyer, because perhaps I'm telling you, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not. I'm a construction person. But please talk to the lawyer, and because if their advice to you is the Adams have the survey, the Adams have the deed, that's all that there is, and you should just correct the records without going to any further process. Are there other people that are being double taxed? I don't know, and that's not my issue. We're not asking for the town line to have a jig-jag in it. We're not asking for that at all. We're just asking for us to revert to where we were, status quo antebellum. 2006, it was 2.4 acres. That's what our survey says. We're not asking for such a big process. And if we could get this resolved, obviously make us very happy. My mother will then be able to proceed to sell this 9.82 acres, which, actually Cheryl says now is in Sharon. And because that land was withdrawn from current use when this property was divided, there's a penalty you're supposed to pay. The state said, well, we can't, Sharon said we can't value it because there's this dispute with Norwich. And then so the state said we can't calculate the penalty. This just goes into layers and layers of stuff, which is very frustrating. And to believe that this is now going to have to go. Look, I understand what the Vermont statute says about how it's resolved and 2 meetings warned and select boards. And I've read it. I have. I'm not a lawyer, but I could read. To believe that this small issue that is affecting my family, it requires so much angst and expense and energy, and it brings in other people, other properties who think they're in Norwich, maybe they're in Sharon. I don't know. It's not my issue. And I don't think that pursuing this to the nth degree is needed. We have a survey. We have a survey by a Vermont surveyor. And until 2007, the town of Norwich's position was 2.4 acres. And what happened in 2007? There was no process. We didn't have the 2 select boards meet. There was nothing. It just happened. And here we are. Should it have been resolved in 2007? Well, probably my brother should have been more diligent about pursuing it. And even if the period for grieving had gone by, he should have done something. That probably was the time to resolve this. But here we are. Here we are in 2024. Here we are. And it's taking, we've now spent a lot of time tonight, and I know you have many other items on your agenda, and you've already talked about this before. So, and we have the BCA hearing coming up. So I think that we should look to then, and before then, I encourage everybody to talk, Cheryl to talk to Brennan to talk to everybody. I mean, and share information. There's no, I come in here and I hadn't seen what Cheryl gave to you, but share information. But will you please consult with the town lawyer and get some advice about how to practically resolve this without making this a multi-year complex process that brings in other people who will not be happy. And so you'll have a lot of issues. And in the meantime, my family will still be in this position trying to resolve this matter. And I'm just trying to find a practical solution, a correct one. I'm not asking you to do something incorrect or something that is invalid or you don't have the authority to do. I'm not. But we have the BCA coming. And at that time, I think it is an appropriate time for you to have gotten some legal advice, shared all the information. And so the BCA can, as I understand it, appoints a subcommittee to actually spend some time on this. And we can come to, I hope, then a simple, not simple because I think that's the simple is good for us. I just think that's better, it's good for everybody if we come up with a practical, simple answer that does not involve all of this stuff. My brother, the final thing I'll say is my brother sent you an email, which came on Monday. The packet and the select board agenda were posted on Saturday morning. So to tell us that we missed the deadline to input information for the select board when you posted it on Saturday for a meeting on Wednesday, and my brother sent a letter, which I'm told that Lily did forward it to you for tonight. I apologize that the notion that we thought that we were submitting something late is incorrect. We submitted it in response to what we saw on Saturday.
Right. And
we were diligent. We were looking every day, the last 10 days, when are they going to post the agenda? Because Cheryl had said that she'd asked for this to be on this agenda. So where's the agenda? Where's the packet? So we can see what information there is and we can respond. In what his response is, whether you've read it or not, but he makes the point that while we all talk about a straight delineated line, when you go out to demarc the line in the field, the line isn't always perfectly straight. So, I mean, we want a perfectly straight line, but that has not always happened when we went and demarcated all of these lines over the many centuries since the town was line was laid. So that's all I wanted to say tonight. I thank you for listening to me. And I would appreciate that we're going to have this discussion again with the BCA, and you're all on the BCA. So,
okay. Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you for sharing that. Lily?
I have a question for Mr. Adams.
Yes.
All right, Marcia, go ahead.
I'm set up.
No, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Well, the question should be to the chair, but go ahead.
So the question is, my understanding from your recitation of the history, and thank you for coming in to give us that, was that your brother owned the property in fee simple in 2004, and there was no change at all in the ownership or deeds in 2007.
Correct.
So there was just nothing that had to be recorded. There was no PTTR. Nothing changed except inexplicably the amount of acreage.
According to the listers.
Right.
Changed. There was no change in the property whatsoever.
Okay, thank you very much.
Roger, go ahead.
No, I wanted to recap, which is, Brennan has done what we asked and done it well and ably, which was, meeting with these listers, getting this 1951 document, which is reportedly documents that are available in our own offices that Lily's office through Judy sent reportedly or allegedly in March to the listers. Ernie references this 1951 survey in his comments, although seems to not acknowledge its credibility or validity. So my only question is, have the listers reviewed the 1951 survey, and do they want to do that if they haven't? And that is it. I'm ready to take a motion and move on from this. Thank you to Mr. Adams, who came and offered his commentaries, and also thanks for Marcia for I think a helpful summary in her work. This is wild. I don't know. So wild. Maybe listers will look at the boundary next and suddenly I'll be in Thetford, like here on Union Village. Like really, what the heck?
Roger, that's not helpful.
I mean, this is
Roger,
you've heard
you're
the
being
testimony.
defamatory. and denigrating another elected official, and that is inappropriate. And I ask you to please
They have-
refrain from making such statements.
I think it is important to state for the record that I believe the Lister's office has put this family through undue burdens and potentially harm. That is what I would like to state for the record.
I heard the listers say that they were told by the contract assessor that this was not something the listers had the authority to resolve, so they came to this select board. That's what I heard. Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Society of Land Surveyors paper on town boundaries says that the majority of cases before 1824 are unreported. So it could vary, and some of those, of course, were in New York because Vermont wasn't an independent state for a while. And we flop back and forth between states, as you all should know. But and then there is another very good case about how you can't, it's Vandermitten versus the town of Wells. And basically, when there's a contiguous piece of land lying in 2 or more towns, each of those towns may value and tax the portion within its boundaries so long as the combined valuation of each portion doesn't exceed the fair market value. And so essentially, listers are supposed to talk to other listers. That's according to the Vermont Department of Taxes FAQ, that they're supposed to discuss and determine those percentages. But I think what's salient for me is that there was no change in deeds, nothing in 2007, and just magically everything changed. And I think that's where we need to look. And I would say that we hunt this to attorneys and our attorneys and see what they have to say.
Thank you. I agree. I think this is something that should be reviewed by town council to give us guidance on whether there's something that the select board should be doing, or if this is a resolved matter, as Mr. Adams laid out, that the survey and the PTTR and the deed are documentation enough. Lily, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that when the BCA hearing happens, it's a de novo hearing, so nothing that you've heard tonight can be used unless it's also presented there. And I would definitely ask council if you, as the select board, should not recuse yourselves from that BCA meeting.
Yeah, good.
That we not recuse ourselves?
No, that we recuse ourselves.
We do recuse.
That we should recuse.
Because we've kind of heard
Because we've
information tonight.
Well, an inappropriate agenda item.
I'm not sure that that's appropriate. I'll think about it.
Well, Lily's suggestion was that we ask town council whether that would be an appropriate action, not whether any individual member thought it was appropriate. So that could be something that could be posed to town council along with, where do we go with this issue? How do we resolve this? Is it already resolved with the documentation?
Right, we follow the statutes, and the de novo review doesn't say if it came before the select board has to recuse themselves.
Right, but I'd feel more comfortable hearing that from the attorney. Cheryl, you wanted to come up and say something more?
One last clarification. If you look at the document in the packet, the basis for changing the acreage, it states that new tax maps indicate 10.4 acres. It wasn't done willy-nilly. It was done with that message to the property owner. And if you'll note, all unimproved land was revalued in 2007. So what I've seen in this list, it's just this page was relevant, but you'll notice all unimproved land was revalued in 2007 was a repetitive statement on the listing of the change of appraisal report that was issued in 2007. So in this particular parcel, there were 2 reasons, not one.
One question I had when I saw this was, do you know if any other parcels along the western boundary were impacted by an increase in acreage based on this new tax map?
I do not. My recollection is that Judy gave this to me and I only got the front page of it. Okay. But I can ask her for the rest of it and answer that question.
That would be good to know, I think.
Yep.
So Pam, is that the answer to my question, which I had hoped that you would pose to the listers, which is, have they reviewed the 1951 survey?
No, that wasn't about the 1951 survey. That was the 2007 new tax maps indicated change in the acreage of this parcel. My question is, were there other parcels along the western boundary that were impacted by this new tax map that their acreage was also increased at that same time?
And I haven't, and maybe Brennan knows, can I have an answer to my question about the 1951 survey that has seemed to loom large in everyone's minds except for the listers?
And your question again is, have the listers seen it?
Have they seen it and reviewed it ever?
I don't know the answer.
I don't believe that I've reviewed it, so I don't know that I have it. If I have it, it's in the paperwork that is in the office.
Fascinating.
And I don't know if Ernie has or not.
If it's the blue line drawing that I saw, dated 1951,
Right.
it is the blue line. Brendan, did you say? Aside from I heard somebody say. Okay, yeah, I saw the blue line.
All
That was
blue.
dated.
Okay, thank you.
Roger, can you mute yourself if you're talking to someone in the room?
No, I'm having being conversational. Apologies. I'm saying yes, Ernie, you saw the blue line. Thank you.
Okay. So you've seen the blue line.
Yes.
Blue line.
And I interpreted it in conjunction with the story I read that it was a codification of what the Public Works Department person did earlier.
Oh, yes.
And that would explain why it's it's not a very big displacement of the original straight line. Because it's kind of like getting around a boundary, getting around an obstacle.
Okay, so it was a minor adjustment.
This is, you know, just as relatively speaking, over the whole, compared to the 6 mile long line, the height of the triangle is very small compared to the length of 6 miles.
Okay, Brennan, go ahead.
So my question came from what Cheryl mentioned there, that in 2007, there were new tax maps that seemed to dog's barking here. There were new tax maps introduced that led to the change from the 2.4 to the 10.4. Do we have a record of that, of those maps, and why that adjustment was made based on that information?
So I have looked for 2007 information. Of all the information in the office, there's every year is there, and 2007 is the least available year. So I don't know where to look for any more 2007 grant list changes that occurred. So again, happy to look, but I have not found any 2007 folders. I have found the grant list, the abstract, but usually there's grievances and there's a grievance folder and there's all these other documents that just are not there for that year, which I would have, you know, helped answer some questions.
Mary, go ahead.
This might be an ignorant question, but who creates the tax maps? Who does that? It's not the state, right?
It's the town.
Is it the listers? No, I don't know. Okay. You're all defensive.
I'm not getting sensitive.
Ernie seems,
Tax map.
Ernie seems to have the answer. Go
Ernie
ahead,
knows.
Ernie.
Well, I was just gonna say, I can't remember her name, but at first we had all our maps were done by just another resident. And that was when I first got to the town in 1988. And then we started hiring a cartographer of our own for the tax maps.
Oh, okay.
And when I was a lister before, they made the cartographer came in and talked to us and made us very clear. The maps are not to scale, they're not perfectly to scale, they're very approximate because, you know, for instance, I'm going to use my own land. It's 58 acres, not far from this, by the way. And it's got a couple of geometric boundaries. And then there's this one wiggly one that's just follows a tree line. And it was hatched on trees. So of course, it was a barbed wire, a piece of barbed wire. So, you know, boundary, and I have a family member that, a sister who was a surveyor in Massachusetts, which has got even older boundaries than this. And she said, they'll be looking at a deed that references a tree that was there in, 1669. And the tree is long gone. So trying to do a survey, it's possible, and I'm not saying this is the answer, but it's possible that whoever made in 2007, the tax maps, did some sort of research like I did and found out that there's been no changes to the town line. And so they knew that it could only stretch between 2 points, to the 2 points that are in the chart. And therefore that would mean that the boundary line has been moved whatever distance relative to the mistake that was made in 1951.
So this mistake could have been by almost like a consultant hired by the town to create a tax map. And you don't know, no one knows.
The mistake would be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sorry.
No, that's okay.
The mistake would be to have had 3 points on the line.
Different reference points, right?
Because the only official thing that has never changed is just 2 points, meaning a straight line, not a triangle, which is 3 points.
Can we find that person?
I think he maybe did. Oh, you mean 2007 one?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Oh, man.
So
I think the 1951 guy might be though.
All right.
can I my hands up?
Yes, go
This is
ahead,
actually-
Roger.
This is actually really not funny, right? So it seems like now a listener is acknowledging the 1951 survey, but is looking to discredit it because of some reported, possibly oral testimony of a guy in a bog. So like this is like actually we heard from a citizen who was deeply affected by this, and this kind of professionalism, this kind of banter is so sad to me. So I would actually like to move on, Pam, if that's okay, because this isn't like, it seems like now we acknowledge the 1951 survey, but are looking to slowly discredit it because surveys are, innocuous and meaning is relative. So can we please move on? Like, this is upsetting to me and probably to the landowner. Okay.
I think that we have spent a great deal of time on this and I would like to move on, but before we do that, I would like to take the temperature of the board on whether we are going to refer this to town council. Would someone like to make a motion to refer this to town council, or is this something we're just going to drop and we'll take it up again when it comes before the BCA? What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move that we refer this issue of the Norwich Sharon line to town council as fast as possible.
So sorry, my hand. Again.
And I'm writing and I will acknowledge you momentarily. Just a moment, please. So we have a motion by Priscilla to refer this matter to town council. Is there a second? I'll second the motion.
So,
Roger, go ahead.
So as we talked about in terms of who this dispute is with, the dispute is between the landowner and the listers for grievance of their taxes because their grievance was denied. I don't think that what we've heard today merits a discussion of bringing an issue of our town's boundary lines to town council. That is not appropriate and what seems to be like the main issue here. We have one affected landowner. And so at this point, sadly, depressingly, I would say that it is the BCA and their prerogative to take up this issue because they will hear a grievance from the landowner. Because again, this issue is about, it seems we have the landowner, not, I don't agree that the issue is about the boundary between towns. So no, absolutely not.
All right, thank you. Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question that I think now needs to be answered is there any statutory basis for suggesting that the statutory members of this board who are members of the BCA should recuse themselves.
Right, so that's like the only thing you think is primed for our council at this point.
That's the only thing I think is prime for council. Because
And
I
you
don't want to get into the BCA and be challenged.
And you don't think that we should pursue the question
Recording in progress.
Okay. All right, and Roger, you accept that friendly amendment, I assume?
Yeah.
Brennan's hand has been up for a while. Brennan, go
So
ahead.
I was just gonna ask, assuming this motion passes, when is the BCA meeting scheduled? And that will dictate how quick a rush we need to put on the legal response here.
It has not been scheduled. There was a query about the 26th or the 27th as a meeting date. And that was withdrawn.
Of September,
No, of August.
it's coming up quick, I see.
It was yesterday or the day before.
Oh.
And the decision was made by the town clerk to pull that and wait until after this meeting to establish some new dates to propose for a hearing. I see Lily's hand is up. Lily, you want to shed some light on that topic?
I believe we have 2 more weeks to hold the meeting.
Okay, within the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. If there's no further discussion, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla, how do you vote?
I'm voting no because I think the language is very hostile to the listers.
Thank you. Marcia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a no. Okay. I think we've exhausted the topic. I thank you, Mr. Adams, for coming in and for your patience, and we will, I'm sure the town clerk will be in touch when we establish a date for the BCA hearing. All right.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes,
this means we're just forgetting about the idea of approaching the Sharon Select Board.
I don't think that has any traction. I mean, you can make the motion if you want to, but I don't think it will go anywhere.
We voted no just now. We like. We took
Not
that
on
out.
that specific motion that was on the motion sheet. That's what she was questioning. Brennan, I see your hand is still up. Did you have something else? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was just gonna ask if, I guess Mary's taking the minutes and noted that motion, if it would be possible to email me that. I was trying to take notes and I got a lot of scratch outs here. So if I could get if I could get a clean request, that'll make it simpler for our attorneys to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's at about 2 hours on the tape if you need to review the tape to see what it said. Okay, next item on the agenda, number 7, the Gile Mountain repair reimbursement. So we've already had a little bit of discussion about this. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a motion on this? I don't see any, so I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to reimburse Jim Fawnin a total of $1,469.11 from Fund Number 4 Conservation Commission Fund for work done on the Gile Mountain Tower.
Thank you. Is there a
second?
Thank you, Priscilla and Mary. All right, there's no discussion. I'll ask for the vote. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
I vote yes, with the understanding that this is going to be smoothed out in the future.
Okay, good point. Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay. All right, great. Number 8, the CCI Computer Services Contract Renewal. Brennan has put the quote in the packet for us. I assume that it's just a renewal of exactly what we signed 3 years ago. Is that correct, Brennan?
Yeah, it's generally the same. We have users, I guess, registered users for some of the programs that go up and down by year, but it's it's, I think, the same agreement, the same service level, which is a high service level. We're usually able to get pretty immediate responses to problems. We'll be probably calling them about the website tomorrow morning to see what's going on there. So
Yeah, good point.
it's an indispensable resource for our town at this point in time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Priscilla?
It seems that we are required to have equipment that is no more than 5 years past the warranty. So, or they won't cover it. And so that means we're going to be replacing a lot of equipment every 5 years. Have we given any thought to budgeting for that?
So I'm not sure where you're seeing that specifically, but I know many of our equipment, laptops and whatnot, have exceeded 5 years, and they still service the equipment.
I thought we replaced everything in 2023.
We didn't replace everything. I'm quite sure of that. You know, we do have, and we do work with CCI on recommendations for when computers start to become so obsolete that they really are not, you know, don't have a whole lot of value and should be replaced. But this contract that we're signing, the service agreement, is not going to dictate that we have a new computer every 5 years in every case.
Okay, thank you.
Well, sorry to drag out a long meeting, but page 5 of 12, section 3, existing environmental sustainability requirements. It says physical server age must not exceed 5 years from the manufacturer warranty start date.
That's the server. That's not the laptops or the desktops.
Okay. I'm betraying my ignorance of technology.
The server is like the hub.
Okay,
The hub of
good.
everything.
Good.
Okay, Marcia, your hand is up. Go ahead.
So just confirming, we buy the hardware, the software and the licenses separately, and they're basically just providing the service and helping us when things don't work.
Yeah, we own the equipment for the most part. They're servicing the equipment and troubleshooting problems as they arise.
So follow-up question?
Sure.
Just for the, when we're talking about budgets soon, the place I used to work had something called a standards program. And I don't exactly know all of how it worked, but basically, it was something like, you know, every 5 years you got a new computer. So I'm just wondering if that's something we should be budgeting for so that we know what we've got and it's in the pipeline for replacement.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that if we want to during the budgeting cycle. Like I said, we do have a list of all of the computers that we have that are being served by CCI. We know how old they are. We know kind of when they're beginning to kind of reach their end of useful life. And then there's normally more of a kind of by the year, we have a budget to purchase new computers, and we use that. But conceivably, we could look out further and be more organized on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the town manager to sign a 3-year contract renewal with CCI for computer services for a total amount of $104,700.96.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. There are no further questions or comments. I'll call for the vote. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay. Number 9, the town manager's report.
All right. Well, knowing that it is 8:45, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. I assume everybody's had a chance to read the written report here. I will just mention on the planning department side that our last round of solicitation for that planning director yielded a number of qualified candidates. We're currently in the interviewing process, but we've had a couple of good discussions with candidates to date. So positive. I'll just skip down Oh, let me just mention briefly the DPW section here. So we are working with town council on easements. So we need a couple temporary easements and one permanent easement for the 3 FEMA funded culvert projects that we have underway. So that's been a work that's ongoing here with Chris, myself, the engineer for the project, and we've brought in SPF counsel here to help us craft the actual easement agreements that we're going to be proposing. The Stantec plans for Hemlock Road are, I think, at this point substantially completed after, again, a lot of work by Chris at the DPW and Stantec as our engineering firm. And we are at this point kind of waiting to get the final obligations for the funds for that project. Assuming that will be forthcoming, we'd be looking to potentially get those out to bid later this fall. Mid-November is kind of what we're shooting for right now. And that would be for a project that would start kind of spring of 2025. So that's moving forward as well. I'll skip down now to the town manager side. Just a quick update on the Moore Lane Bridge. So we did receive one submission for the RFQ. That is Stantec Engineering. They provided what I thought was a pretty logical proposal on how to address the issues there. And that would really be conducting a scoping study initially, and that would kind of look at all of the different alternatives we would have to kind of ceasing the emulsion that's been emanating from the bridge. And then we would be able to review that, and we would make a choice on the alternative we wanted to follow, and that would lead them to kind of a more thorough analysis of costs and taking us really up through the bid process with hiring a contractor. So if the board is in agreement, I haven't done anything yet other than acknowledge that we received their submission. I'd like to reach out to them again, probably this week, and set up the next steps, which would be working on what that scoping study would entail and get a cost estimate at this point, which we don't have, as far as how much they think we would be expending to go through that step. I don't need necessarily a formal motion, but I guess just the concurrence of the board that we would move forward with Stantec to the next stage, which would be drawing up a contract for a scope of work.
Marcia, go ahead.
I was going to suggest a motion. I just feel better with things said.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I wanted to kind of let you know where we are. And again, at this point, if the select board is in agreement that Stantec is a qualified firm, which I think they definitely are, you can authorize me to kind of move forward with a scoping study for the Moore Lane Bridge.
I just wanted to say that if you look at the agenda, I said town manager's report, discussion and possible motions. And the reason I put that on there is that it was brought to my attention that previous boards were making motions during town manager's report on issues that were not on the agenda. And so in order to make sure that we don't make that mistake again, which we did at the last meeting, I put in here, or on the last meeting in July, I put on here possible motions, so that if someone reads this report, they may look at this and say, well, if I'm really interested in one of these items, I would stay through the town manager's report to see if a motion is made, because we should not be making motions on anything unless we inform the public that we may be making motions. Because otherwise we're violating the open meeting law by saying, you know, we're acting on an agenda item that isn't on the agenda. So Marcia, if you wanted to make a motion, go ahead.
Move to authorize the town manager to move forward with a scoping study for the Moore Lane Bridge. Do I have to say with Stantec?
That would be preferred.
Okay. I move to authorize the town manager to move forward with Stantec for a scoping study for the Moore Lane Bridge.
I mean, I'll second it, but it's in a report because action on the board is not required for him to do his job. But I'm happy to second it. Like, we don't need to take an action. He's just letting us know that he is moving forward.
We just had so many issues with, was he authorized, wasn't he authorized? I'm trying to nip those in the bud.
Second it.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion that's been seconded. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla? Yes. Marcia?
Yes?
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay,
Great, thank you. We will proceed, and I will keep folks posted on the timing of getting that up and running. Tracy Hall Energy Audit, I just want to mention that I asked again. Harry Falconer reached back out to Du Bois and King and BGS, and we were told we would have that by the end of last week. We did not. So I believe BGS has required them to have all of these completed and back to the municipalities by September 3rd, which will be next week. And so stay tuned. I think the end is near here, and we'll at least have that report. I just wanted to mention the Beaver Meadow Road Improvement Project. As you recall, this was looking at two distinct sections of that road that we would be improving the shoulder so that it was more accessible for pedestrians to use to walk out to the Kids Bridge or that section of road. We got, as I mentioned several months ago, kind of an informal quote back from a local contractor that they would be able to do the work, and a cost estimate there that was roughly $12,000, distinctly split between two of the sections. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, the timing has not worked out to get that completed this summer. So we were trying to kind of rush to get it done, and it hasn't happened. They are still interested, and I think this can get done here when they slow down a little bit. So I'm now predicting this will probably be an October project. Certainly, we're being told before the end of the season. So I guess I'd like to just keep people apprised that that's where we are, and I'm proceeding with that. If for some reason we don't have that work completed by the end of this building season, I will go back out and we'll issue an RFP at some point in the winter for spring work so that we can get kind of a fresh look at that. But I don't think we're going to get a better price. It's just kind of the process we would follow. Okay. We had a productive discussion this morning with the Prudential Committee and the Fire Department and myself. And I think we're going to meet again in 2 weeks and come back together with, again, some thoughts about how we can find a number for that fire protection fee, or the hydrant rental fee that we've been debating here for a couple months. So more to come on that here in a future meeting. I will mention that I did respond, as I told you at the last meeting, to this notice of alleged violation for work that had occurred up on the Bradley Hill Trail, and I believe a lot of that work has been completed by the Trails Committee with 2 work days, and the letter I submitted didn't receive any kind of commentary from the environmental agent there. So I assume he was in agreement what we were doing was the right thing to be doing here to kind of mitigate the situation. So again, that's all I know at this point. And then finally, under the general miscellaneous category, this is a question that I just kind of want to pose to the board. I don't think action's needed right now because I need to research it more. But we were approached by Hartford, who has, I guess, a legal representation in the Great River Hydro Dam relicensing. And they have actually requested some significant funding to help with some of their waterfront projects and a park there. We, if you recall from the FERC letter that was submitted by the town, had also requested that funds be set aside for 3 different types of projects. We were not as defined as Hartford as far as what the costs would be or how those would be dispersed. It does sound like Lebanon is also interested in partnering with them, and I guess the thought would be that we would kind of combine resources and leverage our 3 municipalities, maybe even Hanover, to kind of make a stronger case for monies being allocated to the towns. So I'm still waiting to kind of hear back on what sort of scope and costs that would entail. But it does sound like, as I said, Hanover and Lebanon are kind of combined at this point, willing to share kind of the cost in order to receive some of the benefits. So if people are in agreement, that makes some sense to at least explore at this point. I will do that and kind of come back maybe with a better handle on what are we talking about for monies for legal expense. Okay, and then my last piece, which is not on the written report here, but came up over the last couple days, is our commitment to pay some of the school tax to the SAU 70 as they try to meet their obligations here at the beginning of the school year. So this would have to be an off-cycle warrant, which I would sign. I believe the board chair signs it as well. It will go out next week, so they had funds by September 6th. And right now we're looking at basically $3.5 million of money that we've already kind of collected in taxes this tax collection season going to them. There would be another equal amount or a little bit more than that even probably paid out by the end of September, and that can go into a future warrant once we know all monies have been collected. So again, I just wanted to kind of put that on the radar as a, if the board wants to authorize the up to $3.5 million to be dispersed to the SAU 70, that's fine. If we all just want to understand that will be the next step for getting them their tax monies, that's fine with me too.
I wouldn't think that we need a motion for that. It's our obligation to
Yep.
collect the taxes and pay the school. I did have a question.
Sure.
I was a little dismayed today to find out that we deviated from a longstanding policy to have the finance office open 5 days a week for the last week of tax collection to allow residents to come in and pay their taxes in person. I came in today and I was told that the finance office was closed and that I could not get, if I left my payment, I would not get a receipt today for that. So I just wanted to say that I don't understand why we deviated from a policy that has been adhered to for many, many years, at least the last 9 that I know of. And today, this week, it seemed to have changed unexpectedly. So.
Just so I
just want-
understand that, Pam, is this a written policy that we have, or has this just been the precedent?
It's a new precedent as far as I know. I asked why the office was closed during the last week of tax collection. And the response was, I was never told that we had to be open.
No, I haven't heard that either. So that's why I'm asking if this was somewhere
So
else it's
I
documented.
hope going forward, we can have the finance office open the last week to accommodate those people who pay in the last week, which is probably the majority of people. Roger, go ahead.
So I would like to thank the finance office for clear and concise instructions, and I happily deposited my tax payment according to those instructions in a very clearly marked locked box, and I wrote a little message that said hello and happy to have you receive it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that I noticed that it was a deviation from a long-standing policy, and I was kind of confused about why this year, this August, things changed. Okay, so any other questions about it?
It may not have been a policy, it may have been a practice, but it sounds like Roger was able to crack the directions.
Well, the only reason that we have even had this as an issue was because of people working remotely during COVID. And so there was 2 days of the week that there was no one in the office at all. So this remote work has been kind of the impetus for these questions, but even with COVID, the finance office was open for tax collection for the 5-day week preceding the due date. So practice, policy, whatever you want to call it. I just wanted to mention that I was dismayed to learn that past practice was not followed this particular tax collection. Any other questions or comments for the town manager on his report? Okay, all right. The next item is the personnel policy.
Okay, I continue on here. So I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. I think Miranda did a nice job of kind of summarizing in her cover letter some of the bigger changes that were made from the existing document. And I assume folks maybe have had a chance to look at that. I know it's fairly complex, but I think far less so than what we had or what we have currently. So I guess I would turn it over to the board. If you had specific questions, I may be able to answer those tonight, or I can come back with an answer at a future meeting. I don't know if the board wants to just digest this for a bit and then come back at the next meeting with some more discussion. I guess I'm not sure where we want to go from here.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Priscilla, go ahead.
I'm really pleased that this is a first read, because I think this is something important enough that we should be able to digest it a little bit. But I also had a couple of very broad brush questions that came up. It's not clear to me what the definition is for a full-time versus a part-time employee. I mean, like maybe full-time is like 40 hours or more, but then there's talk about people working 32 hours, people working 18 or more hours per week. So I would feel more comfortable if that were a little more clear exactly what's a part-time, because that there's a whole cascade of things that come out of that. And accrual policies, we have you can accrue your vacation up to 50 days or 400 hours. We got into a bit of a budget mess with that before. That seems a little long for a carryover. And I'm not very clear on the accrual policies for comp time. And then there's a section that talks about independently elected officials who sort of come under this, and that's always that's been a sticky thing we've talked about before. And I'm thinking, well, which ones are we talking about? Are we talking about like the town clerk, the town treasurer, and the listers? I don't think you're talking about select board members, planning commission members, or anything. So I'm not asking for answers now. Those are just some things that came out at me.
Right, thank you. Marcia, go ahead.
I think kudos to everybody involved in this, because it's very clear. My only sort of elephant on the table is the murky people who are both elected officials and paid employees. And so, they're mentioned in section 20 under group insurance to just eligible full-time and part-time employees and elected officials. So is that going to be, clearly it's the town clerk, but it's not going to be the listers? Shouldn't that be more clear, or are they going to suddenly get group insurance? I didn't think that they did. The same thing with sick leave in section 24. And then, and again, parental and family leave and short-term leave. Again, it says only eligible employees. That's sections 26 and 27. And then addendum B, that was a little funny. The elected officials are receiving hourly wages. We'll get this, like the town clerk and the listers, but it applies only to conduct. I think. And the last bullet point says they shall provide a copy of this policy to appointed employees, which I think means the assistant town clerk. But that person is also a paid employee. So in terms of addendum B, is the appointed assistant clerk going to get just addendum B, or are they going to get addendum A that goes to all employees but not paid officials? So that wasn't a little clear. So yet again, the elected officials who get an hourly wage are confusing. And then finally, I think the employee termination process was excellent. Due process was built in. So I think you did a good job.
Thanks.
Okay, I had a few things that jumped out at me. I share Priscilla's concern about the definition of part-time being inconsistent. I noted places where it was 32 hours or more, 20 hours or more, and then sometimes there were no hours stated, just prorated based on number of hours regularly worked. The other thing that I found interesting was Miranda's cover letter says on vacation leave, yearly accruals based on years of service have been revised to mirror those provided in the collective bargaining agreement. And yes, the years of service have been changed to mirror the collective bargaining agreement. However, the accumulation of accrued time does not match the collective bargaining agreement, which says vacation hours may be carried over from one year to the next based up to a maximum of 180 hours of vacation time. On December 31st of each year, any remaining unused accumulated vacation hours beyond the maximum of 180 shall be forfeited. Employees shall be permitted to carry more than 180 hours of vacation time during the year. So I don't see consistency with the collective bargaining agreement throughout the vacation policy. And then the last thing that I will note is I had the same question as Priscilla about this addendum for elected officials. Who exactly is being cited as being covered by that? It wasn't clear to me. This addendum B. So those were my questions. Other than that, I thought this was a good document.
Well, good. Thank you. So I can answer the one that came up twice was who are the elected officials? That would apply to everyone. That would be select board and anyone who is holding an elected title, and it would be holding those elected officials to the same kind of conduct required by employees of the town in the actual policy, if that makes sense. I guess I guess I'd like some guidance. So a couple comments there or questions. Would the select board like to kind of condense those as kind of everybody has a concern here? Because there might just be individuals with questions. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to come back with a process where we get this approved at some point. So how would we like to attack that?
Well, I'd like to see some consistent language as it relates to part-time, and I gather from Priscilla's comments that she would like that as well.
I would agree with that too. I think consistency is important. And perhaps a little more definition is because Brendan, you just answered regarding the elected officials and who the policy applies to. You answered directly. So, I mean, it should be in the document too.
Okay.
Be clear just from reading it.
Yeah, well, I can certainly, we can look at the full-time versus the part-time. I know a fair amount of discussion with council occurred around that and what the actual amounts of hours needed would be. And, you know, we have a number of different classes of employee really. So I can look at that with Miranda and we can see if there's a way we could tweak it to make it a little more clear and consistent. Absolutely.
Roger, go ahead.
Is the were you looking to have a standard, but then you realized that standard didn't reflect your current personnel, and so you wanted to then accommodate for that? What
Yeah,
problem-
maybe. That might have been part of it. I think, again, really 40 hours or more a week as an exempt or non-exempt employee is considered a full-time employee.
Right.
Less than that would be considered a part-time employee. And then we have, again, past practices where we have folks that are receiving benefits on a prorated basis based on the number of hours that they're working. So, yeah, I guess we were not starting from a blank slate here where we could just kind of say, here's how things are going to get set.
Well, there was one under personal leave that said eligible employees, and I didn't know who was eligible. Eligible employees receive 2 personal days. Does a half-time employee receive 1 personal day? That things like that are just left questions in my mind.
Okay.
I just asked that question because you're not supposed to write personnel policies for any one individual. You're supposed to like have it be sort of
Right. So
the
if
best
a halftime, yeah.
So I would be interested in writing. So I guess as feedback, I would be interested in writing the standard that we think is best, and then having a conversation or having your office figure out whatever you need to do for the existing employees, because I don't want to be revising these personnel policies as often we bargain a collective bargaining contract, because that is inappropriate.
No, that's fair. I think that's probably very few employees are going to fit into that category of being kind of a
Well, then what I
special
would,
case.
okay, so because I would just say, like, if we need to change things, I would rather, if we need to make good, in order to have a standard, we have to make good to certain people to have a stand. Like, I don't know the particular cases. Obviously, you do, but I'm just saying that I would say you should work towards the standard that you want to see. If it's something like 25 hours or more is part-time. So 20, like part-time is, you get benefits if you work 25 hours or more, and it is accrued at a prorated basis. Seems like clear language to me, but I wasn't part of the discussion, so I don't know.
Yep, fair enough.
Marcia, go ahead.
So those are some of the things that I was talking about, paragraphs or sections 20, 24, 26, and 27. And I guess I'm wondering, Brennan, if you talked to council about how we deal with the hybrid employees, the people who are elected officials who get a salary. Because again, in 20, it talks about part-time employees and elected officials being eligible for group insurance and other insurance programs. So do we need a definition basically of those hybrid employees? Same
Well,
goes for
to Roger's point, that's kind of writing a policy around existing conditions. So I think we do have elected officials who are now hourly employees. I don't think we have anyone who's a salaried employee. Like there's no exempt.
Isn't Lily?
Town clerk.
Lily is salaried.
That's true. She is salaried. So we have one example where we
Is
have
is
a
Judy
40-hour
hourly?
week. Judy is an hourly full-time employee, yes,
but she's not elected, she's appointed.
correct.
Right.
So I just think, without writing to a particular position, we've got this really strange situation. And so I think it's gonna come up, and how do we handle it?
Yep.
That's my question.
I agree.
Okay, well, for the sake of tonight, thank you for the first review and some comments there. I can certainly take this back and take a couple looks at what we might want to do to make it more clear on some of those cases. Would the board then like to see kind of a revised, I mean, these could be track changes where we'd be able to use the existing document. It'd be easier to
Yeah.
see what.
Definitely. A red line would be great.
Yeah.
I think, can I add one more point?
Certainly. Go ahead.
I think what I've sort of always been interested in, I'm interested in sort of a wider HR exercise around policies. So like right now we're asking questions about things not need to be written into policy, but as we learned before, there's a difference between policy and a practice. So I think it is reasonable to try to engage in some kind of process where these policies are kind of like tested out or enacted. Like you have policies at any place of employment, and then you would go to a representative to see how it is, like how it's effectuated. And so what might I I don't know how it would work, but what might be interesting, Brennan, is this policy is taken to some other kind of professional that talks more about how it like can be, how it like actually affects employees. Like I don't have, rather than trying to write into policy like how it affects people, like we should be able to get a sense of like how that works. Like I don't know how, I don't know, I can't think of an example of that right now, but I just know that we right now have the person who handles like an HR complaint is also the person who wrote the policy, right? And so I don't think that's a conflict, but I think it might be helpful to figure out like the HR aspect of these policies. I'm struggling to articulate what I mean, but maybe you get it.
Sure. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I got it.
We built a car and we want to know how it drives.
Yeah, and I think I would like to insight into that before I adopt like a policy that, you know, could crash the car.
Well, all department heads were asked to review this and give their input. So that's not the same as living under the policy once it changes, but at least they were afforded the opportunity to see what changes were being proposed. And maybe that's something that can be talked about in their performance reviews. Is there a problem, you know, does a problem arise with some policy that creates an issue for them? But I don't think that's something that we can resolve here tonight. And so I'd like to move on. Cheryl, you wanted to, oh, Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I anticipate what Roger is saying is that we want to make sure that when specific fact patterns show up, we know how they're going to be resolved through this policy.
Yeah.
And that's the job of the town manager, right?
Well, yeah, but he has to follow the policy. And when it's like, you know, you've made the rules, and then when something happens, you have to figure out how the rules are going to apply. And that's not trying to figure out the final result. It's just kind of testing the machine that you built.
Right. And the town manager will tell us if there's something that needs to be tweaked. If that situation arises. I don't want to anticipate issues. Cheryl, you wanted to make a comment?
I wasn't here, sorry, I wasn't here for the beginning. If you already know this. Are job descriptions going to be updated as a part of this policy process?
That hasn't been part of our discussion, no.
Okay.
We never put job descriptions in these kinds of documents.
No, but I wondered, my question has to do with, do they need to be changed because of the new policy? It's more of a, how are they related?
Right. Does the new policy impact job descriptions in any way?
Yes.
Okay, good question. All right. Unless there's any further comments or questions, I'd like to move on. Number 11.
Do you want to
You want to make a motion to accept it as a first read?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to accept the personnel policy as a first read.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion or comments, Mary, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Priscilla? Yes. Marcia?
Yes?
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. All right, thank you. And thank you for bringing that to my attention, Priscilla. Okay, now on to the Select Board Handbook review. You'll see on your motion sheet that the motion is blank because I wasn't quite sure what we needed to accomplish tonight. So I will turn it over to Marcia to tell us how she would like us to proceed on this.
Well, I think at this stage, I've submitted, can't find it in the page here, but I submitted what people had sent in for their charges. We could look at those charges and see if we feel that they're appropriate. But I'm also thinking it begs the question about what we think the committees, what we want the committees to do. If we don't want to make any changes at this point, and we just want to say, okay, this is what the committees have said, and we agree with that, then I will put that into the handbook, which is still evolving. And, you know, we'll wait for the rest of them. And then I think next phase would be sort of naturally, we would contact the different, potentially the different groups and say, you know, we'd like to just have a conversation with you, which would basically be us for the first time getting information from committees and sort of having communication about what the goals are for the town and how they fit into those goals. And it would also be useful, you know, because we're coming up to budget season. If people are looking for money, we can be proactive.
Okay, yeah, I read through this and I wrote down a few questions and probably not going to resolve them tonight, but I noticed that you pointed out that somewhere we say that the Energy Committee has 5 members, but then we have 7 appointed members. I'm not sure how to resolve that. Maybe, you know, we need to do some research to figure out where the 5 and the 7 came from. Maybe it's supposed to be 7 and we just don't have that change recorded. Historic Preservation only has 3 members, which is very concerning. Usually we have people begging to be on that, and it's supposed to have 7 members. So how do we resolve some of these issues of getting these committees fully flushed out with membership? And then the last thing was, I noticed that the Planning Commission did not come with their membership for the solar siting, the land use, and the what do they call it, multimodal subcommittee. I believe they're not going to call those subcommittees. I think that's the determination, that there'll be work groups. So we would need to reflect that if that's the way
Does that
they're
mean,
going to go
does that
forward.
mean work groups need to be defined as part of the handbook?
Well, work groups were mentioned in the letter from SPF. So Marcia, you want to address that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, this is supposed to be a reflection of who's doing what for our town. It helps us, it helps the committees, and it helps people who are thinking, I'd like to be involved, but I don't know what there is to be involved in. So I would say anything that exists, we should put it in the handbook. And then I would hope that we have agenda items where maybe we meet with 2 groups per meeting, you know, and just sit down and say, okay, here's the page. What looks right about it, what looks wrong about it, and have a discussion and make changes so that we end up with a reflection of what really exists. The other thing I wanted to get the board's temperature on is, I think anytime you try and cite data like members and terms and budgets, you're asking for trouble because it's appearing in more than one place. And I think that the town manager's office should really be the holder of that information, and that we should just, instead of trying to put it in the handbook, cite to the website where it's going to live, because then we don't have any problems in terms of confusion or wrong information.
Yeah, double entry can lead to data not matching up between the 2 locations.
Right, and I
Um,
was thinking that if we just, for budgets, we could say yes or no, they have a budget or they don't have a budget.
I think I would agree with that, that just stating the number of members and then having the membership list somewhere else. And that's one location on the town website where that's kept current. Makes a lot of sense. And as far as the budget, if you want to just say yes or no, I have no issue with that. Because budgets change from year to year, and then somebody would be responsible for trying to keep that updated.
So if we put down number of members, like with the Energy Committee, it's gonna be a disjoint. So,
But we need to research that and figure out which is the correct number. Is it 5 or is it 7?
well, it might be simply that we appointed 7 people without any basis, but.
Right. And so maybe through attrition, as people's term ends, we could say, okay, we're just not going to fill that position again.
Well, does
Um,
anybody feel comfortable with just citing to the town manager's website or the town website for term length, number of members, member names, and terms? Just leave that off here completely?
And have that be on the list that's kept up to date, in other words.
Right, so that would just be held by the town manager's office.
I guess I don't feel strongly either way. But what you're saying is that you would list any statutory requirements, any charge that has been approved by the select board, and things that are constant, consistent.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense to me too.
So where are you in terms of this work? Do you need help on anything? Are you just working with the committees to pull in information that you still need?
The graph or the grid that I sent you shows who has submitted information so far.
Right.
And so where it differs from what I had somewhere, I'm looking for where it went to. Then I think we should look at each one that's submitted and just say, yes, we think that's right, or no, we don't think that's right. And it's 9:30 and potentially we don't want to do that tonight. But maybe we could do that next time. And I could actually, I know that some of the committees were saying that they were going to meet this week, so I might have more information and we could maybe just next week be prepared to look at what was on the position descriptions, which is column 4, and what the committee sent to us, which is column 5, and just see which, if we have a problem with it or want to ask more questions, or if we just want to accept it and put it into the handbook. And then when the handbook is finished, we can start meeting with the different committees.
I see some of these you have ready for select board review. And are you thinking that maybe those are the ones we would start with, and then as the other ones ripen, we would add those to our agenda?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know what the agenda looks like for the next meeting, but maybe we can schedule 1 or 2 of these committees for review. So, and anyone, Mary, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, just a question on the open meeting law section. I think there were sort of frequently asked questions, but also there was a statement that the Secretary of State's office was coming up with more precise guidelines, and that it would flow out from them to the town manager and the select board, and then we could disseminate information about that. Did I understand that correctly?
Right. I didn't.
Do you know the timeline for that, or?
I think it says either in the letter or in the link that's in SPF's letter that they're planning to have that beginning of January or something. So it's coming out.
What do we do?
Here it is.
If it is January, what will we do in the interim?
Well, I think we can't be giving any information really. I mean, I didn't put in this FAQ from VLTC. My document ends on page 50, and
How did that get in there then?
I don't know. But
Well, it seems to me to be a little dicey to completely not talk about the open meeting law at all. Especially because, maybe we work with what we know. And then once it's updated, then, we'd want to work with that material, but just to not mention it doesn't seem, especially this town. You think of what we've gone through with, really trying to do our best with open meeting law, but being caught out a few times, so.
right, I mean, I think there's something on the town website about, what came out, and I haven't looked at that closely. It may be just what VLCT has published. I think again, we want to be careful about giving too much instruction, but linking to what's available.
Right, some kind of happy medium, but not nothing.
So
The town website came up, it just came up with Chrome. Open
Interesting.
meeting law information is on the homepage on the right. So there's several pieces of information there. So if committee chairs have questions, there is information on the website to help guide them.
So I can just put a link in the open meeting law section on page 4 of the document that says, for now, look at what we have on our town website.
Yep, good. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Any other questions or comments? Priscilla?
I just want to thank Marcia for doing this and being so thorough. It's the kind of work I just couldn't imagine doing. So I'm especially appreciative of what you're doing for us. Thank you.
It is a monumental task, and I thank her as well.
I have one more
Yes.
question. It's about the, I think there's a 2018 reporting policy. Which is in there in one of the, I think, appendices. And I'm just wondering if we created a policy that won't work.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we have to take up, and whether we want to take it up before we start meeting with committees, I don't know. But it was obviously passed in 2018, and maybe we just want to put that in the next packet and have a look at it to see if what we think needs to change.
Just review it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Right, yeah, if you would send that to Brenna, we can talk about that for our next agenda.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else? All right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is department reports. I see that we have the report from the finance office for the first period. One thing that jumped out at me was all the accounts with zero balances, and I thought we had talked about maybe suppressing zero balance accounts. But that's my only comment on the finance report. Any other comments about the finance report? All right, and we've got a report from the fire department and a report from the police department. I'm sure everybody has read those. And we thank them for submitting these reports. Number 13, the AP warrants. We have 3 warrants in the packet tonight. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1166 in the amount of $188,351.12 to be paid from the general fund.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any comments or questions? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, the next warrant.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1170 in the amount of $185 to be paid from the general fund.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia,
Yes,
Roger,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And the last one.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1169 in the amount of $2,725 to be paid from fund number 478.
I'm sorry, it's Fund 47.
Okay,
Sorry.
Fund 47, Public Safety Facility Fund.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. All right, number 14, the August 14 minutes, because they were inadvertently omitted from the packet. We tabled that to our next meeting. And then the last thing is correspondence. And the only correspondence item we have in the packet is the Articles of Association for the Norwich Water Company dated 1922. So would someone like to make a motion to accept correspondence?
I move to accept all correspondence.
Thank you. Is there a
I'll second.
second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes,
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. All right, that is everything that's on the agenda. I just want to let everyone know that the timetable for agenda setting for the next meeting will be a little bit different because I will be traveling on our usual day, which is Thursday, September 5th. I will be traveling all day. So we're going to meet on Wednesday afternoon to set the agenda. I will get it right out to you. And I will do my best to respond to any questions or comments that come in about the agenda. But I will not have internet where I'm going.
Too bad.
I know. It's going to be very difficult for me to get to internet, but I may be able to, and I certainly will try on Friday morning to get the agenda to Miranda so that it can be posted. But I just wanted to let you know, I will get the agenda out on Wednesday, the 4th of September. And again, still try to get it back to Miranda by Friday morning at 9. So, like I said, I'll be going in and out of airports and traveling. And so I will try to respond to any questions or comments in a timely manner, but there may be some delays. Okay, having said that, we're at the end of our agenda, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. And the time is 9:38. Yep, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia?
yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:38 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Recording stopped.
Have a good evening.
And then I'll get you that motion early tomorrow morning before office hours. That
Okay, yeah,
That-
you don't have to
Rudy
have it at the
one.
break of dawn, but sometime tomorrow I'll
It
send
might
it.
be the break of dawn, but it will be before you come to office, I think.
Okay.
It won't be
thank you.
late.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Good night.
Night.